But probably doesn't sound too happy being in the.
Okay, you should be all set, Steve.
Good evening and welcome to the June 11th, 2025 meeting of the Henrietta Town Board. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Here.
Councilmember Belanca,
Here.
Councilmember Barley, Councilmember Stafford,
Here.
Supervisor Schultz.
Here. I'm going to increase the volume for the computer because it's a little quiet.
You know, feedback. Oh.
Go ahead and try say something, Heather.
Is this better?
Yes, thank you. All right, we'll begin with a silent prayer followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the preceding town board meeting, May 21st, 2025.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 10-223, 2025. Whereas John and Lynn Guerrera have donated $199.99 for a tree that has been planted at Tinker Park in memory of Monica Mistrella Fisher and Robin Tremblay. And whereas a check in the amount of $199.99 was received by the Commissioner of Public Works. Therefore, be it resolved that the Henrietta Town Board acknowledges this donation and thanks John and Lynn Guerrera for their generosity.
Second.
Any discussion? I'd just like to say thank you for thinking of the parks when planting a memorial tree. Our parks suffered loss of trees, especially with the recent emerald ash borer. So repopulating our parks with trees is a great way to both do a memorial as well as help the town. So thank you again for that. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 10-224, 2025. Whereas the Henrietta Public Library Friends and Foundation Incorporated has donated $300 to the Henrietta Public Library for outdog flag bunting. And whereas a check in the amount of $300 was received by the library director, therefore be it resolved that the Henrietta Town Board acknowledges this donation and thanks Henrietta Public Library Friends and Foundation Incorporated for their generosity.
Comments? Oh, sorry. Second. Now comments. The Friends and Foundation makes a lot of donations to the library. They do a lot of fundraising efforts, and really help our library out, cover some of the things that not covered by taxes. So very appreciative of all their efforts and their continued work on behalf of our library. Any further comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Blanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Our first public hearing is for special use permit application number 2025-020 7 Brew Coffee, 2599 East Henrietta Road, to construct and operate a restaurant with a drive-through and limited walk-up service. Please come up, say your name, your relationship to the project, and make the presentation.
Hi, thank you. My name's Larry Adler. I'm with Seven Brew, and in particular Brew Team New York LLC. We're the franchisee for most of New York. We have the territory from Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, all the way down to Orange County. Between our group and our operating partner, we have over 100 locations throughout the East Coast of the U.S. We have currently we have 6 locations open in New York to date, and 7th will be opening in July. As mentioned, this is for a special use permit for the drive-through at 2599 East Henrietta Road, which is the Beers of the World Plaza that's owned by FSI 2599 LLC. Just a little bit about Seven Brew. We are a drive-through only, beverage only coffee stand. We use double lanes for stacking that go around the entire building. We sell espresso-based drinks, smoothies, and energy drinks. There's no food prepared there. The only food item we have is a prepackaged muffin top that we sell. Our baristas or greeters will come out to the lines with an iPad and take your order. So there's no drive-through window per se. The beverages are delivered to the cars. And because we don't have any food, the typical waiting time is 3 to 4 minutes. So it's a much quicker in and out, if you will. The property that we're talking about is a little under a half acre. We use a small footprint. It's a 540 square foot building with a remote cooler and storage area that's about a little over 300 square feet. And we also provide a dumpster area. It's all clad in Nichiha, which is a cement fiber, looks like brick covering. On the plan that we work with, and I should go back, the supervisor and staff and planning, we've had a couple of really good conversations and meetings that resulted in a better layout here. So appreciative of the town for their help and efforts along the way. This plan has a queuing of about 18 cars in these double lane drive lanes that go around the building. As I mentioned, the public doesn't go in the building. It's employees only in there. So there's really no need for parking. And we have about 4 to 6 employees that work per shift most of the time. Happy to, that's pretty much the sum and substance of it, but happy to answer any questions or.
Go ahead.
So they bring your drink out to you, you don't have a window that you get it from?
Right.
Okay. And then how about if you're in line and you want to get out? Hey, it's taking too long. Is there any way to escape?
Not once you're in, once you're in the line, you're in the line. Most times there's not, the double lane is not used most of the time. So you could go to the outer lane and get out.
Okay. And on the diagram, they show the building and then they show the smaller building. That's the cooler, right?
That's the cooler.
Okay. Because over on just by the road, they have proposed exterior cooler, and I just wanted to make sure that it was actually next to the building and not up by the street.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One of the things, just looking at that, Mike, if as we're going on this, we decide we want it out, you could conceivably from the right-hand lane, you could kind of put an exit only out through that green curb. So basically, as I'm coming across, just something that continues north.
Right.
We'll have the planning board as they get into, that'll be part of their discussions when they do the site plan, but that's something. Chris Martin, and or Craig Eckert, please just take a note of that, to have that discussion at planning board as to whether it makes sense to have an escape lane. You know, we didn't want the exit of the main exit coming out into that entrance, but if it was just for the occasional escapee, so to speak, somebody who gets in line and then realizes, oh, damn, I forgot my wallet. Late for work or, yeah. So. Any other questions from the town board?
No, nothing that the planning board will take care of.
One of the things I will note, we've talked about, that what we would like to see from a public safety standpoint, and this is more for the plaza owner, is that, the plaza to the north of this, there's a back part of that plaza that's only accessible down a narrow lane. And, there's a gym back there and I forgot what other business. And one of the things that we'd like to see is if somewhere there could be a gate through the fence, it would be a locked gate with a Knox box so that emergency vehicles, this is again more for the plaza owner than Seven Group. It's just so we can figure out where it makes the most sense to do that. But that way, if an ambulance has to get back there, it's a lot easier than coming around. There used to be a pass through between the two, and that made sense when there was a light out here, and I understand why that's now closed off, but I'm just concerned if a fire truck or an ambulance has to try to make that turn and go down that narrow space between the fence and the building. I'm afraid it's going to be difficult. So just to be able to have a emergency access, if God forbid it's ever needed, is something I'd like to see. So. That won't necessarily hold this up. It's just something we've talked about with the plaza owner. So, other than that, like I said, we had a couple of meetings with our engineering team to go over this, and I think it works out a lot better because it, you know, the exit comes away, gives plenty of room for the vehicles to exit out of the parking lot. You know, for those unaware, that light that used to be there at the exit from the plaza, going back to the days of it being a Wegmans Plaza, that's gone. That's been removed by the New York State DOT. So this is an uncontrolled intersection now. But you know, certainly making a right turn out of there is not a big issue. And depending on time of day, making a left turn isn't. There will be times where they might be better off going out onto Calkins and turning at the light than trying to make a left out of there. But that was a decision by the New York State DOT. We wanted them to keep the light. They basically said it didn't warrant it and they removed the light. So any other questions, comments?
On average, can you say how many patrons you get there a day? Your average store?
I don't have that. I would, I would just be throwing out a guess. I would say probably 500-ish. That'd be a guess.
Just wonder if the state would warrant it then.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yep.
I mean, that's the thing. They do have the option to put it back in, although they didn't build, as you see, if you've been by there lately, they're getting away from the lights that are strung on wires and going to the lights that are on the mast arms. They did not put in the pole bases for this intersection since they got rid of the stuff. So it could be put back in, but it will be non-trivial going forward. But But yeah, we'll see what happens. We did let them know that this plaza was growing. Because they made that decision even before O'Reilly's came in. They made that decision a year or so ago. So. All right, I'm gonna open up questions to the general public. Is there anybody who wishes to speak with regards to this application? Is there anybody online?
I do not have anyone online.
All right. Then hearing and seeing no further comments, I am going to close the public hearing for special use permit application number 2025 0207 Brew Coffee.
Thank you.
To- Okay. Fellow board members, I have resolution 10-225, 2025 to issue a negative declaration and approve special use permit application number 2025-020 by Brew Team New York LLC for a 7 Brew Coffee at 2599 East Henrietta Road.
Second.
I'll note that from the restaurant permit, we typically list the types of uses. It's specifically for takeout meal service and drive-through meal service. There's no sit down, no alcohol, no bands. So, and that's about it. Any other comments, questions? Then hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Congratulations. We look forward. When you guys are ready to do a ribbon cutting, if you send me an email, that we can, I can put you in touch with the local Chamber of Commerce. They have ribbon cutting, the giant scissors, the whole 9 yards. So
Thank you.
you bet. Thank you. Next up, we have special use permit application number 2025-021 Erie Station, West Henrietta Road, multifamily development by FSI 5500 LLC, Erie Station Road, near 5500 West Henrietta Road, to construct a multi-family housing development. For those not familiar with the site, it's the western portion of the former Delphi property. Introduce yourself, your relationship to the project, and tell us something about it.
Yep, my name is Joshua Saxton. I'm from Pastor Associates. I'm a civil engineer. With me today is Franken Berja and Dave Merrick from Team FSI. They are the clients and the developers on the project. As you stated, where the project's located, it's basically west of the old Delphi building there, near the corner of West Henrietta Road and Erie Station. I guess before getting into this, just a little history on this parcel. A bunch of years back, this actually kind of went through a similar process with the town with its current zoning of industrial with specifics for a larger, basically industrial building, about a 250,000 square foot, kind of in the same location as these residential buildings. During that process with the town, we got a lot of feedback from town staff, residents, other surrounding neighbors, on obviously the concern of a building of that size, and also traffic with obviously larger semi trucks and delivery vehicles, lights, things of that nature. And so there was some pushback to kind of developing the parcel with its existing zoning. So, you know, what we're discussing right now is special use permit, and then the next item on the agenda for the rezone kind of go hand in hand with molding this from obviously industrial specifics, more large scale industrial development, and transitioning it to what we believe is a better use of the property, which is residential, given the surrounding area has a lot of single family homes to the south, to the west, and also some multifamily development as well. You can kind of see in the northwest corner there of existing multifamily in the area. So, you know, we obviously when this project started up, before we even got to this step, we've had multiple neighborhood meetings. You know, what you're seeing now isn't the first go. We've gone through iterations from town staff input and more importantly, local neighbors. Our first neighborhood meeting was kind of just the immediately adjacent parcels because they're the ones that are going to be most affected. They obviously had a lot of feedback, a lot of questions and changes they wanted to see to the plan, and we adhered to what was that we could. And in that second neighborhood meeting, we kind of expanded it out to a larger group to obviously get more feedback on people that were impacted, but not maybe as much as the immediately adjacent neighbors. So that's kind of where we got to today of actually submitting it officially to the town, and to get kind of a general description of the parcel. It's a little over 40 acres of the site. Right now, there's 368 units proposed, coming into about a little over 9 units per acre, which is below the density threshold that the rezone would cause. We're not maxing out the units on the site. We're doing what fits for that area and also adhering to the comments of the town and the neighbors to obviously, bring the site in. That was one big portion of the comments and the discussion when this originally went through the neighborhood meetings. You can kind of see that clear area in the southwest area. That's kind of adjacent to historical district. So we obviously wanted to adhere to that buffer, pushing it out even more than what's required. And then on top of that, adding in some berms along that southwest side to really kind of shield the historical district from the property. We also moved things north from those smaller 10-unit townhomes to get more space from Erie Station Road. Obviously getting those off of the road, kind of farther away from the single-family residence to the south, was a priority just to get that separation and that buffer between the uses. And then for, I guess actually just the site layout in general, and how kind of our approach of laying it out on that kind of southeastern portion, those smaller rectangular buildings, those are 10-unit townhomes, with their own associated driveways. So we wanted to put those kind of on Erie Station because that's generally the higher portion of the site. And those buildings are actually going to be sitting down lower than Erie Station Road at its peak. So that's one item that also came up at the neighborhood meetings, is wanting to, not be completely blocked off. There's a great view on Erie Station Road, similar to when you're coming down West Henry Road as well. Get to see a nice view of the city and the surrounding landscape. So that's something we wanted to, try and maintain for the residents to the south. And we're going to try to achieve that obviously by lowering those 10-unit buildings down. And then from there, as you're going north, it kind of tiers down. So those kind of more larger H-shaped buildings, those are larger apartment buildings, the 40 units. So essentially those are going to be sitting lower than the 10 units, but obviously given the height of the building, they're taller than the 10 units. Those need to be sat down lower to still maintain that line of sight. Then there's another drop down for those additional 2 40-unit buildings from there. And then you get to the clubhouse of the site, which will have a pool, and is kind of the front-facing building right along that corner. And then if you're crossing that existing roadway there, there's a proposed 68-unit apartment building there as well. That's kind of sitting on the lower end of the site and won't impact the view. And I guess there's another part of it, the actual facades of the buildings. We've already started with some renderings and some elevation views of those buildings. Given the nature of the historic district, we've really kind of gone back and forth on how those are going to look. And they're still, being worked on, but where we're at now, they're a good elevations that are kind of mimicking and adhering to kind of the nature of that historic district. With a lot of those buildings kind of being kind of a more simpler facades with some certain accents that we're using mainly on the clubhouse, given the proximity of that to the historical district. And that's going to be, one of the first buildings you see when you're driving by the complex. There's a couple other things got up in the neighborhood meeting, stormwater. I know that was brought up on West Henry Road. There's some flooding there that we're looking into. The kind of the blue areas on the site, those are proposed stormwater management areas. Those are going to be included to meet the town requirements for stormwater as well as state. So that includes treatment of the stormwater with, bioretention areas or infiltration basins, and then kind of larger deep pools for the quantity. Henrietta requires 20% reduction of stormwater leaving the site. So that's the intent of those stormwater management areas, is to meet those requirements. And yeah, that was about the summary of kind of the bigger points from the neighborhood meeting. I know that was kind of the start of it, and we're still pretty early on in the project as well. Obviously, we're kind of just still in this conceptual site layout change, and then obviously if things go through, we'll get into design with more detail on elevations and look and other utilities and things of that nature. And obviously we're here to discuss the special use permit and then also the next item for the rezone. So I'm here to answer any questions that the board has as well as the public.
Yeah, so I just want to get some stuff down from some of those meetings and how they've been mitigated, and this is largely from a seeker standpoint. So there was, we talked about them going to the maximum buffering to the historic properties. They did adjust the site plan to do that. At the meeting with the historic properties, they talked about how if there was a berm and or, basically bulldozers or excavation within those berms, that the vibration could damage the cobblestone basement walls. And so it was asked that any such earthwork be outside the buffer, and that was agreed to by the developer. When talking to the residents from Erie Station Road, there was a request to move it further away from Erie Station. It was in closer proximity, and there was a fear that some people, like delivery trucks, would stop on Erie Station and just try to walk over to the apartments from there. In addition, as I move it further away from Erie Station, it brings those down further, which again gives better over the view top. The view over the top was a big concern, as mentioned. And so one of the things that you go for, one of the things we would like to see, again, from a planning board approval standpoint, is we'd like to see the view sheds. It doesn't have to be for all the homes, just pick a couple. If there's one at each end of the hill, maybe pick one at the bottom, middle, and top of the hill, just to show what it kind of looks like. There was a concern about the view, especially from West Henrietta, because that area is going to be nice and open. And so there was a desire to put a work into the clubhouse. There was a suggestion from the Historic Site Committee that the clubhouse take inspiration from the Carrot Shop. The current renderings that are there did do that, and really nice combination of essentially a cobblestone look, probably not real cobblestones, but a cobblestone look, and board and batten or plank. There was overall, when you looked at it, it was more of what I'll call the more modern style, where the units have multiple siding options within a single building to differentiate the units. This is for the 10 units where they're more a townhome style, which isn't really consistent with the older historical homes. So what they went to instead is each building is consistent with its architectural style on the front, but each one has different character. So there's a bunch of different styles: vertical board and batten, shakes, planks, different finishes, but consistent with the region. So again, that helps make it more consistent and blend in with the regional area. As was noted, the significant development to the west of this, Erie Station Village, spent a lot of time doing that same kind of thing to make them look like buildings that could be from that historical period. So that was very important. You already mentioned the stormwater runoff. It's very important that any of the stormwater gets captured. And again, not just capturing what is currently or what you're going to create, but also capturing some of the current so that we reduce the amount of stormwater that gets down the hill towards those historic homes. Again, the more water we can take away from their basements, the less threat there is to those basement walls. And then the vegetative screening, the existing trees in that buffer were going to remain, and there was going to be some potential new screening on the proposed berm and other stuff to, again, try to separate this to provide a nice green backdrop to those historic homes. I think I captured all of them.
One else I wanted to add, we have done a traffic study, submitted that to Monroe County DOT. They had no comments. Still waiting on New York State DOT. They've had some turnover the last couple of months, so
Yeah.
its review's been delayed, but obviously waiting comments from them, but didn't have any major mitigation involved.
Yeah, their initial discussion with the town was that they didn't see this as being an issue. They see it as less of an impact than some of the other stuff that was potentially, when you go all the way back, that was originally approved for the site. And that the intersection can take it. One of the things we look at is that most of the traffic would exit from the northwest entrance and go northbound on Erie Station Road. One of the things we want to try to, you can't eliminate it all, because obviously if someone's heading down towards Rush, they're going to go through the intersection at Erie Station and West Henrietta Road. But we prefer that it's kind of laid out that, and it has been, that the traffic would essentially go away from the hamlet, not through the hamlet. So. Questions, comments from the town board?
The proposed 10 unit apartments, are they one story or two?
Two.
Now, are they, but is it each unit is up and down, or is it there's an apartment on the first floor and a separate apartment on the second?
The latter.
But they all have their own entrance?
Yep, all their own entrance and separate driveways, yes.
And originally there was talk that I thought there was talk that the 68 unit apartment was going to potentially be affordable, or was that a separate one?
Frank, when you said it hadn't panned out, I mean, are you planning on building it, or are you planning, it hasn't panned out as far as being affordable? Okay.
Other questions?
Now, you've addressed the issues that have come up in the previous meetings. The only thing I think I asked you to consider possibly having some units wired for the hard of hearing, the deaf and hard of hearing, please.
No, this is, yeah, so just point of procedure. Anytime we're doing a rezone, which this is predicated on, there's a meeting with a hearing, no decision is made. We gather as much feedback as we can. We fold that into any seeker determination, and that is handled the following meeting. If there's still any identified potentially adverse impacts that remain unmitigated, then we would put off approval for yet another meeting. But the point being, we're not taking any action tonight. This is mostly input gathering. We want your feedback, because that way, again, we can, I've listed these here in the record because the other meetings were not recorded. They were just neighborhood meetings to get feedback from, again, those most affected. We've found that with the smaller meeting, more intimate meeting like that, you're more likely to get feedback than in a public meeting like this. And so we just find it's very important to get that feedback from the immediate neighbors, make adjustments to the plan based on that feedback, come back and do another iteration. And so that's what you're looking at here. But obviously, if there's anything that was missed, or if there's any new issues that you see arise from these revised plans, let's bring that up. Because again, that way there's a chance, they have a chance to offer some mitigation if we identify it as a potential adverse impact. Any other questions internally
If I remember
on the board?
If I remember correctly, the developer isn't going to be managing the apartments, right? He's going to have somebody else manage the apartments.
Heather, are you able to hear his responses, or do you want me to repeat them?
If you could repeat them, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, so Mr. Frankenbergia said that they use a third party to manage. They do not manage the properties themselves. They basically have somebody who, that's their business, is to manage properties. Cabot Group is what he was saying, so. Okay, any other questions from the town board? Then we're gonna open this up to the public. Gary, I saw you had your hand raised. Oh, lady, I'm sorry.
Oh.
You have to come up to the microphone.
On the map that was sent out to
Can you give
the,
us your name and address?
oh, my name is Melissa Mack, and I
Great.
live at 859 Erie Station Road, directly across from this development.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm looking to get the actual number for this. Well, first of all, I want to say everything that we talked about earlier seems to have been addressed. I'm just looking for some concrete details about how far the setback is from Erie Station Road to the first, I guess, driveway here at that corner apartment that's there. Do we have a number for how far?
They're looking it up. You know what I would suggest? Just, yeah, sit at the, no, yeah, just sit at the side table.
Okay.
Perfect. That way you can answer questions. Perfect.
This on?
Yep.
It's about 150 feet from that one corner apart.
Probably
part of the building.
150 feet. And from looking at the map, it looks like it kind of, if we drew a straight line at the edge of the back property on the lower left-hand corner,
Mhm.
the residential property, it would cut across. So it'd be kind of even deeper than that property line, right across there?
Yes. Yeah, if you were to, then that lower level.
Okay. All right. Very good. And then I also would like to see the view shots that you had asked for. You know, because I think that's important just to see how the lay of the land is going to look when it's all said and done. But other than that, I think it's looking good and it's shaping up nicely. So thank you for your input, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Coming up.
Michael Heading. We live at 5628 West Henrietta Road, a house on the historic National and State District. Everything is looking like it's shaping up pretty good. I know at a previous project meeting about a former rendition of something prior to the apartments, I brought up the fact that when we first moved in, we had a really wet backyard. And so we were told by town drainage it was our problem to take care of. So we dug a pond and we've been managing the water that comes in our yard. Sometime along the way, they redid Erie Station Road and took away some of that water. And most people don't want water on their property and they want it mitigated away. But we were told at a previous version of this that they would make sure that our pond didn't dry up as a result of this. So I just wanted to see if we could put that back on.
We can take a look at that. I mean, one of the challenges you have is getting it to that pond and nowhere else.
Yeah, but we do have overflow pipe that's tied into the storm sewer.
Right.
So.
It doesn't look like there's much in the way of stormwater management, although again, one of the things I often note is the level of details that goes into the planning board site maps are way different than what comes in
Right.
here.
I just wanted to get it back
Right.
on record. for the
Yeah, no,
version of
that's
the
great.
project.
So what they might be able to do is, as they have that berm and it's directing the water away from the properties to the west, maybe they can put a swale that heads towards your pond.
Yeah, or just some sort of stoned in, drained pipe or something that kind of helps feed it a little bit, because when it does dry up, when we have droughts and stuff, it's pretty unsightly, and then it
Right.
kind of just didn't live up to what it was intentionally made for. And then the other comment I had was like where the berms are located now, there's a good stretch of road there where there's probably going to be lots of headlights and whatnot, and a view of the parking lot, basically. If somehow those could be tightened up or connected, or I'd like to see like
You're
what the
saying
tree.
between the two berms?
Yeah, because while during the summer months, there's a lot of woods in our backyard, so to speak. There are big voids in those woods, and then in the wintertime, there's no evergreens. So basically, I have a view of the hill right now, but I would have a view of the road with the headlights and the parking lot. So just as that design part comes together, if that could be mitigated, something we were looking for.
Mike, what number did you say you were on? What's the
5628.
He's this big one.
The
immediately
long,
west of
long,
Menard.
2-acre-ish property.
All right, anything else? Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Next. And this is why we have the neighborhood meetings. Shortens the time of these meetings. Anything online? Still nobody online?
That's correct. No one.
Oh, we got someone in the back. Come on up.
Tyler Keller, 1063 Erie Station Road. So I just had a question about what on a previous iteration of this, both as well before being residential and now with the first draft I saw of this, what used to be a fire road going to the Erie Station Road exit of the former Delphi building is now a permanent road.
Yeah, so there used to be a emergency access gate for a residential property, like for a industrial where you don't want the trucks coming out that way. That makes sense. For an industrial from a emergency response standpoint, that doesn't make sense. Vehicular traffic going down that road, going down Erie Station is one thing. We didn't want the heavy industrial vehicles going down that road, but just everyday cars. It's not a giant issue.
Well, I mean, 368, I'm probably off by a few, but apartments will call it 550 cars, they're going to be in this. So, I mean, if half go each way, it's an extra 250 cars on Erie Station Road, which is already not doing well with its.
Based on past traffic, they do not have to go each way. The vast majority of the vehicles go out through the north.
Well, that's why, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, if it's a West Henry Road address, I feel like the majority, if not all of the traffic should be going out onto West Henry Road.
Which is where it will go. But again, from a public safety standpoint, it does not make sense to close that off and not have that.
Well, I mean, if it's all going to go that way, why is it a public safety standpoint? I mean,
Because the fire marshal, the fire law states you have to have two
The-
means of egress.
Right.
which is my next point of, has there been any discussion with the corner properties who has exit that could be very easily tied into this main road that will come out onto four-way intersection with a traffic light?
You lost me.
I don't know. Did you say Conar?
Yes, I did. Has there been any discussion with essentially the neighbors, the neighboring developer here to tie in?
I know that.
I'm not clear where you're talking about tying in.
So the corner properties, where the daycare and the gas station are.
Oh, you're talking about Erie
Yeah.
Station Village,
At Thruway
directly
Park,
across
yes.
from Thruway Park Drive?
Yes. It would make much more sense to have all those cars coming out onto Thruway Park Drive at that intersection where there's a light to
So
control it.
you would have to talk to the property owners there to get them to agree.
And that's why
to
I'm
give
asking
up
if
that.
that's been,
No, because again, this is an entrance that has been here forever and a day. I I guess I'd ask the question, well, if someone's developing the property behind you, would you want us to come in and say, hey, Tyler, let's get rid of your house and put the entrance out that way? Right? There's people who have businesses there. We'd be going through somebody's property, and essentially the only way to do that is to essentially force them out of their property.
well, no, I mean, when you look at a map, when you look at any kind of industry, there's very clearly a stub of where you could tie in between the two properties.
Well,
But
I don't know if I agree with that assertion, but there's ARC, Veteran Care, Pride, Enjoy Childcare, Lattimore Physical. Is there a currently undeveloped property? Yes, but again, that person still owns that property. So,
I will say for the traffic study we prepared, it does get reviewed by the town, New York State DOT, Monroe County DOT. So it's not like we just put it in and no one takes a look at it. So if, if we find any of those red flags or if the DOT brings up anything, then they would. But, at this time, they on their review of the traffic study that there wasn't any issues at that time. Or like I said, most of our traffic distribution will be going on West Henrietta Road, just based on the historical data of the traffic in the area.
and that was one of my other questions I wanted to ask is, when was the date of that traffic study?
It was earlier this year. Would have to get I'm not the exact date.
No, it's fine. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
I know there was one that was done in 2020.
Yeah, oh yeah,
It's not really relevant.
we redid all the traffic
Cool.
count
Okay, I
data.
want to make sure.
Yep.
In my last case, Supervisor Schultz, what you said about it was a previous, in and out. Absolutely, it was. But that was for Delphi, which had 500-600 employees at the time.
right, 500 to 600 cars all leaving around the same time.
But is that building not going to be redeveloped as well as part of a future? So if that building's at capacity, you're going to have 506 employees on top of another 500, 600 vehicles for the development coming in and out.
Yep, potentially. Again,
I'm just trying to future-proof this.
well, first off, you can never future-proof because you know exactly what happens when that development comes in. You take a look at the combined usage at that point. But, again, from a standpoint there, New York State DOT is more strict about some of the stuff than others. Ultimately, since it's emptying onto their roads, it's a state road for West Henrietta Road and it's a county road for Erie Station. They're the ones who ultimately make that decision from a traffic standpoint. Again, we're not seeing the traffic issue. One of the things that's been interesting, we just did this in another area. So on the intersection of East River Road and Erie Station Road, a whole lot of homes have gone in over the years, right? 3 different significant neighborhoods have gone in. The traffic is actually less now today than it was before any of those started. That's largely due to the pandemic and the change in drivership. So again, looking forward in the future, they had basically done all these calculations based off of trends and stuff like that. You just never know what's going to come and change things. So the amount of traffic through this area is actually far less than it once was. Even as some of the traffic has returned, going to the Lehigh Station pre-pandemic, that on-ramp to the expressway used to back up past the Tim Hortons. I rarely ever see it. It was backed up today some because there was some construction going on and I just happened to be going through when all of the UPS trucks were letting out. Again, these are taken into account in the traffic studies. The folks who maintain those roads, and that's New York State DOT, they look at this stuff long and hard. That will be taken into account. If the use at the Delphi ends up being greater traffic than it once was, that's something that's got to be taken into account when that comes in. If the New York State DOT says we want to try to line it up with a throughway park, you know, the problem that you come into, there isn't a way to bring that straight across. To go straight across, which is how that intersection would make sense, I'd be going through buildings.
I agree with that. That's
So
unfortunate.
it just gets to be difficult. If they ever determine that a light needs to be there, they call them warrants. If it warrants it, then they'll require it to go in. And typically what would happen is that would probably be put as a burden on whenever the former Delphi building itself gets potentially redeveloped. Right now it's in use, Rochester Regional Health, but as anyone who lives there knows, it's not an intensive use right now. So if they go to a more intensive use and it's going to generate a bunch of traffic, and the warrants from the New York State DOT determine that a light's going to have to be put in there, the developer will have to put in a light at that point in time. This stuff, from all the numbers we've seen, does not warrant it. Does not warrant a light there. So we can't put that burden on them to put a light on there. First off, New York State DOT wouldn't let it go in, just as they removed the one across from Beers of the World because it doesn't warrant it anymore. They won't let you put in a light if it doesn't warrant it. They actually find that it increases the likelihood of collisions if I have lights in areas that don't warrant it, because a lot of accidents happen because people aren't paying attention to driving. Somebody stops in front of them and they rear end them. They've actually found it's more dangerous if I put in a light where it's not warranted. If there are a lot of people coming out, and especially a lot of people making left turns, which isn't that likely, but if that turns out to be the case and it creates accidents, they'll take a look at that. And if it warrants a light, they'll require a light to go in. So, any other questions?
My final comment, Councilman Page, to what you said about having the two entrances, you technically already have that. There's, you know, if you want to make that argument, you can drive up Area Station around the Delphi complex and then in. So,
Yeah, but just so you know, from a fire safety standpoint, the two exits that come out to that same drive, there's not enough separation between those.
if I have the fire safety, you know, that's why I think it should be a fire gate. I absolutely agree with that. I do not think it should be accessible to the resident.
Your opinion is noted.
I-
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Coming up.
Hi, my name's Deborah Waltzer. I live at 11 Churchview Lane. And the question I have is, excuse me, with 360 units, is that correct? 360 units, will there be any provision for non-smoking units?
Basically, the developer said, I guess we've never been asked that question. That's one of the things that they could take a look at in as they develop it. Could they make a floor or one of the buildings non-smoking? It gets tough. You know, the problem is you start to get into, gets a little more challenging when you're talking about people's living space. Declaring a building to be non-smoking, you could certainly encourage it.
I know that there are other properties that do that, not
Yeah,
necessarily in Rochester, but around the country that do that. And it's very much an attractive option for people
yeah,
who are
they could certainly
allergic
take a look
or
at it.
whatever. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Coming up.
Michael Heading again. With the subsequent meetings that are gonna be happening, obviously it's just an open public forum, but with the next meetings, will there also be a mailer sent out to alert the
No,
residents, or you
because
just
we're
have
not
to
gonna,
track it as you, if you would like to keep?
yeah, so basically I can tell you when the next meeting will be. It's 3 weeks from today.
Okay.
I
I mean, like, is it gotta go through planning or when they actually?
Oh,
vote,
yes,
all that kind of stuff?
I'm trying to remember if there's any public hearings left in terms of the planning board
That's the only time when they get mailed is when it's a public hearing.
when it's
Otherwise,
public hearing.
if you want to track the project, you have to do that.
Correct. Let me check. Chris Martin, do you have that answer? Are there any public, if they get approval here, are there any public hearings left? Is there any public hearing for planning board? Is Chris Martin on
He's here.
and unmuted? If you're not able to get your computer working, Chris, why don't you come into the main meeting room? Well, Chris is, shall we say, old school on some of the stuff. One of the things I will note is we can take a look at that. If there isn't a public hearing, we can look at potentially certainly sending something out through an e-notice.
Yeah, or is there a way to like sign up for like an email list to be
Yeah,
alerted?
yeah. So there is a if you go to our website, and it's receive notifications, there is an e-notify list. I will find out from I'll find out from our clerks which one makes the most sense, but go ahead and let Chris answer the question.
Yeah, so unfortunately, my microphone is not working, but Chris Martin, Director of Engineering and Planning. So once this clears the hurdle for the rezoning and the special use permit, the next stop will be the planning board. Now, typically for a site plan, there is no public hearings for it. However, we do send mailings out to the public.
Oh, okay.
We do want the residents to know what's going on at the planning board level because the plans are a little more detailed than they are at the special use permit phase. But again, that'll probably be some time to take those plans from the conceptual stage up to the, the detail that we require for site plan.
Yeah, that'll be a while because they've got all the utilities, all the building, the structures, the grading. There's a lot of work between now and then. But that's good to know that there will be a mailing.
Yeah, we usually send that for these bigger projects. We usually send a mailing out to the residents.
Okay, well,
We try to keep the same rate that we would for the mailing that we sent out for the public hearing for tonight.
so I will just say that rather just to go to more solid words, we will send out a mailing.
We will.
You said usually, so in this case, we will.
All right.
All right, thank you, Chris. Any other questions? Gary, coming up.
Gary Goodridge, Chairman of the Historic Site Committee. At prior public meetings which I attended, and the one with Frank and his team, it was stated that the view site renderings would be available at a public hearing for people to see before the planning board. And what I'm hearing now, it doesn't sound like that's the case.
So they can do, if the challenge you run into doing them before the planning board, and we could do potentially ask them to do some rough ones for the meeting in 3 weeks. The issue you've got is those are typically better generated from the CAD drawings of the buildings. Now, they might be able to do just simple mass models. So if they've got the footprint and say it's a 2-story building, they just put it up. But in terms of creating a more accurate 3D model, those typically come, at the level of detail that you create for the planning board.
Right, because I remember at the last one, this gentleman here did show one that people spoke to me about afterwards. And it just had the dotted lines and they weren't understanding at all.
Right.
Even though
I
tried to explain the elevations. And
that was not a view shed. That was a profile just showing the relative heights. Yeah.
Right. And
that most people have trouble following those types of drawings. So we can take a look at. Do you think you'd be able to generate just a simple block model?
I would say so, yeah. At least massing of knowing from certain viewpoints.
Yeah.
Right, like this.
And so I'll work with you if you want to just propose. Like I said, I would look at 4. So three or four. I would basically do one from, again, I'll say directly south of the westernmost 10-story or 10-unit. I'd say looking from the easternmost, across the street from the easternmost story, out of the back of the, we'll pick the, what's it called? What's the cobblestone building there? Horizons Group.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah,
then
Mark Connor.
I would do one looking down the main entrance towards the clubhouse. Those would be the four I would recommend.
And,
If you want to do additional, that's great, but those are the four I would recommend.
right, and then there was a question that just came up, and I thought I remembered from a prior meeting, but Mike actually brought up when he was talking about the view up the hill. And the cobblestone also brought that up. He's the berm,
Right.
concerned about the bulldozers. I thought there was gonna be some vegetative, either pine trees or something.
There is.
blocking the view of the houses.
There is, and if you look, they're actually already existing. This doesn't have vegetation on it. This is, the berm is,
Right.
what's showing the berm is the elevated, but they're leaving all of the existing pine trees that were planted.
Right. 'Cause-
And then they're gonna add, so one of the things that's not on here is the vegetative drawings. Again, that the
Right.
landscape plan is prepared as part of the planning
Planning
process, not as part of here,
And
but
that would be from the West Henrietta Road, just a little view of potential
right.
vegetative.
So that's why, if you remember, I read and specifically mentioned
Right,
that.
you did.
So what we do is when we do our approval process, any of these things that have been identified as potential adverse impact that they've offered mitigation, we make those conditions of the approval. But we don't, again, it's too early to have them on this plan. That then becomes a tool for the planning board to make sure that their planning board stuff addresses all of the potentially adverse impacts.
And I remember that. I just remember people at some of the public hearings were bringing up the fact, obviously the view shed.
Right, well, that's why, like I said, I was thinking that we do one looking up from the
Points, yes.
the south corner of the cobblestone, that'll get those three historic properties. And then, like I said, one looking in the entrance to get a look at, just see how the field or the clubhouse looks, and then the taller buildings behind it.
So my last comment I want to make is, from our committee standpoint, because we had the historic district, we appreciate everything you've been trying to do to help keep it in character with the historic nature of the district. So, and Frank and his team have been very good about suggestions made by our committee about trying to keep it that way.
So one of the other things I will note is, we are going after a New York Main Street grant for this district, for the hamlet, specifically for funding to help with the restoration of the former Cartwright's Inn. As restoration, if you look at Ken's Pizza Corner, you can start to see some of the lime is starting to bleed out. So the masonry needs some work. If there are other historic properties in there, I don't know what the current condition of, for instance, the where the post office and the fire hall is, or some of the stuff across. I will note that if it is a secular building like the church, there are severe limitations on what it can cover.
Yeah,
If
there's
it's a
actually separate grants for that.
yeah, if it's a non-secular, for the Main Street grant, if it's non-secular, there's a maximum amount per building, but if it's in a particular area, they want to see, again, we can take a look at that we pursue for some of these other buildings. Now, like, the Horizons Group has already done their restoration. I'm not sure if he's got anything left. But some of the properties around there, reach out to me, supervisor@henrietta.org, spread word to your neighbors. If you have some stuff that is there. I will note that there is a requirement that you are either registered with the on the historic as a historic property with the state or federal, or if you aren't currently, as long as you apply for that registry prior to the grant, then you'd be eligible. But if you're not registered on the state or national, you're not eligible for the grant funds.
Right.
So that's one of the things we're going to do is to get the Cartwright's properties, and there'll be funds available for both buildings since they're two separate buildings and they're both historic buildings. So, so like I said, I just want to mention that now while we have some of the residents from that area who might know the folks in that area. We're going to be pursuing that grant. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Yep.
Did you see a view from Erie Station also?
Yeah, so two from Erie Station, one from the essentially south of the western of the 10 units. So it'll be looking out over the berm in that direction, and then one from the eastern side, just to give two different viewpoints, because of course Erie Station is climbing as it goes to the east. So it'll give people in between can hopefully extrapolate between the two views. Any other questions, comments? Okay, then I'm going to close this session of the public hearing, but we're going to keep the actual public hearing open for our next meeting, which again is 3 weeks from today. So, and as mentioned, if you can have those view sheds done, again, if they don't have to be textured and all such, but if you do have the modeling software that can throw some of the trees as to what you would be looking at from a tree standpoint, that's great. As much as you can put in there, I realize I'm spending Frank's money, but you know, money's no object. So, all right, any other questions? Okay, then as I said, I'm going to close this session of the public hearing. However, the public hearing will continue 3 weeks from today. Thank you. Next up, we have a public hearing. It's for the proposed local law. This is the rezone. So it's essentially covering the same stuff. The only thing I'll just mention different is that basically what we're going to do is we're rezoning it from industrial with specifics. We're going to get rid of all the specifics. It's going to be residential R215. We were talking about possibly putting the lower limitation on there. We will probably just do that through the approval, the density. We'll probably do that through the seeker instead. And that's just because the more specifics you have in your zoning stuff, the harder it is to keep track of stuff. It's easier if you put it, like I said, it'll be a limitation on the approval. So are there any questions specific to the zoning? Obviously this is being done to accommodate this. You know, I will say that the general opinion of pretty much everybody at the previous meetings has been they see this as a lot less impactful than the industrial development. So again, they're appreciative of the work Frank and Berger has been doing to help find a solution that works for him as a property owner, but as well as the residents in the town. So, you know, appreciative of everybody working together and appreciating of the time from all the neighbors who have come to these meetings and provided their input. Because again, as part of the seeker process, we have to identify these potential adverse impacts and we can't think of them all. So having people come here and give us, you know, what some of the issues are as they see them, that's very helpful. So any other questions, comments on that? Then again, I'm going to close this session of the public hearing, and that hearing will also remain open for 3 weeks from today. Next up, we have a public hearing for a proposed local law to amend the zoning codes. I'm sorry, to amend the official zoning map of the town of Henrietta to rezone approximately 5 acres of land located adjacent to Pinnacle Lutheran Church at 250 Pinnacle Road from residential R120 to residential R215. Go ahead and introduce yourself and the relationship project. And
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Supervisor, members of the board. My name is John Sharaba with Land Tech. I'm representing this evening both the owner, which is the Lutheran Pinnacle Church on Pinnacle Road, and the prospective buyer, Mr. Lou Bavone, who is under contract to purchase this property. As the public notice stated, we are looking to rezone 5 acres of this 10-acre parcel. We would like to rezone this to R215, which is consistent with the property or the zoning class of the properties to the north. Essentially, what the property area that we're looking to rezone is everything outside of the church and the church parking lot. That includes the grass area to the north and also the drainage area to the east of the parking lot. We are proposing a townhome project for sale. This will be, we have access to existing public water, gas, electric, sanitary sewer. We're proposing no new curb cuts on either Pinnacle Road or Stone Road. We're going to utilize the existing curb cuts that the church has. As we go through the site plan process, there may be upgrades to those access points, but that's our intent. We are proposing an HOA that'll take care of maintenance and other associated aspects of the property, and this will be a private road, no dedicated features to the town. We feel that there's a need for this in the marketplace. And as I said, the units are for sale. We assume in this market right today, they're approximately 1,300 square foot with basements and 2-car garage. And we know that they're going to exceed well over $400,000 per unit. So we feel that it's going to be a positive impact to the neighborhood. As I mentioned, the neighborhood, we did have an opportunity to have a public meeting back in April. That meeting was well attended. I think we had members of the town board there as well. And the concerns of the neighbors were generally, as we all have, traffic, drainage, lighting, landscaping, all those issues. But as I remember, I took detailed notes. There were 2 main issues in my mind. The first issue that I'd like to just hit on a little bit is drainage, especially for the neighbor that is east and adjacent to the property. Mr. Sand, who lives right next to the existing stormwater pond. He brought up historic knowledge of the workings of that pond. And that pond was created as part of the original subdivision of Bell Tower. With the new regulations in place, we're going to work closely with the town engineer and his consultants regarding stormwater management, and also keep Mr. Sand in check on that. I know he's got specific concerns and issues with that we can't speak to tonight, but we hope to if we move to the planning process. The other major issue that came up during that meeting was landscaping. The large curve, our north property line, and its relationship to the Bell Tower properties. We had a full house that night. Some neighbors complained about landscaping. There were some dead trees and things like that. Other people have said we planted these trees, and they really want a clear understanding of what's going on there. So as I said that night, I'll say it again tonight, if we're fortunate enough to move past the rezoning, our first step as a firm and as the consultant is we want to stake out that property line, actually mark it physically, and then set up a meeting with the homeowners association and actually walk it, have an understanding of what they're looking at. So then we can incorporate those elements into the plan. And as I say that, the landscaping plan is going to be significant. We also need to locate those features. And if there's features that the planning board feels that should stay and we can keep them even though they're on our property, we'll do so and work in that regard. But those were the 2 main things that I really took away from that meeting. And other than that, this rezoning, I think we look forward to going to the planning board. If the board rezones this, I think all the details will come up then. That's a very brief overview of what we're looking at. I think this is fairly simplistic rezoning, and we hope the board agrees and look forward to addressing any of your questions.
Yeah, so I will note that the area to the north of that is R215. The style of townhomes that they're looking to put in there are very similar to the style that's in their existing. That size home is needed. It used to be an inexpensive home. They're not with these crazy real estate market prices, not to mention construction prices, especially if tariffs start to kick in. It's unfortunately, the real estate market has just gone bonkers. But with that said, they're still cheaper than if you were to build a 2,000, 3,000 square foot home. So having more inventory of this size will help. From a consistency standpoint, it's pretty good. I will also echo the same concerns that were raised during the community. Most of the problems that I heard from the drainage, they weren't concerned about drainage issues you were going to cause. They were concerned about the existing drainage issues. When that development was put in, it's pretty flat, and they did not do the best job in providing a place for the water to run off to, especially, as you mentioned, to the people to the east. So one of the things that we typically look at when we do these is we put a requirement that they not only deal with all of the additional stormwater that their project creates coming down from the roof. So again, they'll have gutters that will go into storm pipe systems, and any of the impervious surface like driveways and roads that'll have to collect into the gutter system and all be carried away. But we're going to look to have them do additional stormwater collection from the neighboring property so that they can draw some of that water away and hopefully dry some of these areas out. How much of that's going to, can there be? I'm not sure how much can be done from a grading standpoint because this area is so flat. But the good news is when you look at their plans that they're talking about, you see the two halves of the crescent there. The housing is all going on the northern and western portion of the crescent. The other south portion is going to be a stormwater facility. He called it a stormwater pond. It really isn't much of a pond today. It's more like concrete channels, and it can fill up if it backs up a little bit, but the idea is that we would have them, and I'm speculating the type of stuff they do because I am not a stormwater engineer, but we do have those in town. But presumably they would put something in there that has greater volume. So when a storm comes in, it's a way to collect this water. And then what happens is the outflow from it is the same size as today, or even typically we try to have them reduce that. So it creates less downstream flow. Essentially during a storm, that pond builds up, holds it back, allows water to drain downstream, and then over the next day or two, the pond drains back down. If it's a detention pond, the pond will fully drain out. If it's a retention pond, it'll actually hold some amount of water. That decision as to which of those types will be made between the developer's engineers and the town's engineers. And again, they're going to take a look at how can we best help the surrounding areas, because again, one of the things in Henrietta, it's flat. The ground has a high clay content. Stormwater is a problem in this town. Even if we didn't add another building anywhere in town, we still have problems with stormwater. So anything we can do as these developments come in to help the existing properties with that. I will say stormwater management has come a long way since a lot of this town was built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even up through 2000. So hopefully we'll see some improvement on that. Questions, comments from the town board?
John, can you remind me how many actual buildings and how many units?
The current plan is 18 units. We'd like to stay in that range.
Okay, but they're townhomes, so how many separate buildings? Is it 6 or 5?
4 quad units and 1 duplex.
Thank you.
Any other questions from town board? No. All right, I'm going to open up the public. Any questions from the public? Come on up.
Hi, again, Deborah Waltzer, 11 Churchview Lane, a neighbor of this proposed area. I wasn't familiar with the previous meeting, so this may have been covered. I apologize for asking, but first of all, so the church is selling this land, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, it's a beautiful swath of land. Why is the church looking to sell it?
I can't tell you. I have no idea.
You are the developer?
No, he's the engineer. He's the engineer for the developer.
Engineer for the developer. Okay, and you don't have information, you can't share information about why. the
I don't
church
really
is
have
looking
any,
to-
I would share it if I did, but that's a private real estate deal between two entities. I don't know.
I guess my suggestion would be to ask the church.
Yeah,
Presumably, knowing where most churches are these days, they're in financial
they're
straits.
hurting. They're hurting. Okay. It's just a shame, you know, in terms of beautiful land that's sitting there that doesn't really need to be developed. And then specifics, you said they are 1,300 square foot units, 2-story, 1-story?
The mix.
Really? There'll be some that are 1-story?
So our goal would have the center ones be the 2-story and the end caps would be ranches.
Okay, gotcha. 400,000 price point,
Correct.
HOA?
That's
How much?
the fee.
HOA, yeah.
Can't tell you. I don't know. HOA fees are based on construction cost and all the elements associated with that. So at this point, it's way too early to tell you that.
Okay, okay. And the feeling is there's enough of a market in this area for $400,000 for 1,300 square feet?
I guarantee you there is a market. When houses go up for sale, even for ridiculous amounts, they sell like that.
For 1,300 square feet, which is tiny,
Yeah,
which I would imagine is smaller than these other units.
no, it's about similar size.
I thought they were about 1,600 or 1,700.
So this is a very preliminary plan, like
Yeah.
I've said, so they could be 1,400 square foot by the time it ends. This is the plan we're working with currently.
So has a decision been made that there will definitely be some development, or is that not yet
So
decided?
the idea is, the whole idea of the rezone is whether it's going to allow multifamily there. If they allow multifamily there, this is essentially their initial design layout.
Yeah.
But again, as you start to get into, if you think about it, to develop the full site plan for planning board, it's an expensive process. Well, you don't want to, as a developer, spend all that money if you don't even know if the rezone is going to happen. So it's a multi-step process. The first step is the rezone. So they come in and this is the general design,
Mhm.
and whatever they end up with typically is especially because the way we typically put conditions on the approval that essentially say something to the effect, you know, essentially similar to what was presented, right? But again, to his point, could you end up with two additional units? Maybe each unit gets a little smaller and I have a few more units, or each unit gets a little bigger and I have a fewer units. Yes, that's possible. That's typically done at the planning board step. Because as I mentioned, they're not going to want to invest that kind of money in the architecture and the engineering necessary to create that level of plan to come into there. Some stuff they also do, they'll typically go out and they'll do test bores to see what type of soil it is and what, you know, in terms of the price, you know, this is one of the things I've had this argument with the governor. She said, well, increased density and it'll bring housing prices down. It actually doesn't. Houses sell at the market value. If at the time these go up for sale, those houses are brand new at that style, you know, with that level of amenities, sells for 400,000, they'll sell for 400,000. If they're currently selling for 350, they'll sell for 350. To give you an idea, the house across the street from us, built in 1956, 1,200 square feet, $300,000. And it's got like peach colored porcelain in the bathrooms. It's only got a single bathroom, doesn't have a tub, only a toilet and a shower. They got rid of their shag carpeting. The people who live there sadly passed away, but they were the original occupants and they had never updated it from when they built it in the 50s. You could have filmed the Brady Bunch in this house. You know, I'm telling you, the real estate, that's how crazy the real estate market is.
I guess I wish I had heard about this sooner.
I'm not sure why you
I
wouldn't,
don't either, because
because
I got
we
this
sent-
in the mail.
we sent the mailer out, so I don't know.
Didn't get it.
Unfortunately, the US Postal Service is not as reliable as they once were. I'll just put it that way.
Deb, whereabouts are you from this?
So we're on Churchview Lane, which is right in that
Yeah,
development.
if you would have gotten this,
Yeah.
if you got this mailer, you would have gotten the last one. So you were on the list. I'm not sure. Who knows?
Something went wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, there was someone back here coming up. And I saw you're next.
Good evening. Good evening, Steve Sands, 86 Stone Road. I'm the water guy.
Okay.
I have no issues with the plan for the rezoning and at that current plan. It looks nice. I think it'll fit into the neighborhood there. Church is probably selling because they need money. I see their attendance on Sundays and Saturdays. I think that's been down since the pandemic. My concern, and John mentioned it, and you addressed it at the informal meeting, was I'm at the bottom end of this flat plane there. A couple of things that were brought up tonight, and I wanted to get it on the record. With the last zoning request for the other property, there was mentioned that Henrietta is requiring a 20% reduction in stormwater runoff.
Correct.
And my question is that the stormwater runoff from the project in parcel 1?
So that's of the existing area that's being developed.
Yeah.
It has a certain amount of runoff today, even with the grass. There's still runoff off of grass fields. They have to reduce that runoff by 20%.
Okay.
In addition, when you put in impervious surfaces, if you don't do any stormwater management, you'll increase the amount of runoff. So they not only have to capture all new runoff they create from impervious surfaces, the total runoff has to be 20% less than the existing condition today. That's the minimum. Now, as we've talked about, as much as possible, we're going to work to capture not just the runoff here, but to give other areas around here, there are places where you go in there and after heavy rains, it's soggy, as I understand it. And so the idea is if we can give a place for that water to go, and store up, that helps those drain faster and reduces the amount of impact on the neighboring. In addition, if you are downstream on the stormwater, if I just take all this, as we've talked about before, and just put it into the storm system, that means that obviously the higher flow through that storm pipe, the slower at which any laterals coming into it, the water flows in. So that goes back to why you want to have a detention pond that captures that water as it's coming down, but lets it go down the pipe at a slower rate, because that then provides more ample opportunity for the water coming out of other storm laterals from other neighborhoods. And we've seen this, one of the classic places, I don't know why they built it this way, but I think I'm trying to remember the two streets, Colony, I don't know. I can't remember the other street, but the two streets, there's an 8-inch pipe and a 6-inch storm pipe, and they come up north towards Calkins, and they meet into this box aimed at each other. And then it goes under Calkins. Well, as you can imagine, during heavy rains, which is going to win, the 6-inch pipe or the 8-inch pipe? The 8-inch pipe wins. Now the 6-inch pipe has nowhere to go, and it back surcharges, and you can actually watch the water bubbling up through the storm grates going backwards. You fix that downstream flow, and now that water has a place to go. It's the same thing with this. If we can reduce the amount of water that's going into that storm pipe over towards, I think this area drains to Allen's Creek. If you can reduce the amount, again, the total amount of water is actually going to be the same or greater, but I'm reducing the rate. I'm spreading it out over time. That's the purpose of a detention pond. We don't really have that facility here. Any water that comes in theory, goes out. Now, there can be some detention because as those inlets get clogged, they'll essentially start to create that. But if I then have a flat surface, what happens? Of course, it overflows
In
into.
the 17 years I've lived at the house, there's been 2 or 3 times that even during the night, I'm up looking out to see how high the water is.
Right,
Now, the lucky thing for me is on Stone Road, there's a runoff that will flood Stone Road before it floods my property.
right.
And there's also a stacked drain that has a bigger top that would start taking some of that
Yeah.
overflow. But that depth of that whole area there, looking at the 1992 survey, it's only about 5 feet
Yeah.
deep from the top of the berm to the bottom. I don't know how you're gonna hold more water.
Oh, you dig it deeper.
Well, right now, it hasn't rained for what, 2 days, 3 days? It's still wet down. You can't walk in most of that.
No, I understand that. So again, that pond area, the part that's gonna be a stormwater pond, this goes back to what I'm saying. To get the necessary volume, if I have to essentially bring it down, that there will always be some water retained at the bottom.
So the question I also wanted to know is this gonna affect water coming into that area from Heritage Meadows? Because that's where the bulk of the water comes from.
So
When Heritage Meadows was developed, that's why all that was developed and made it as a drainage easement there.
So this goes back to, as they're gonna, obviously, if all that water's coming this way and it's coming towards their buildings, they're gonna wanna have some sort of, whether it's a swale, whether it's inlets, they're gonna wanna collect that stormwater and route it to the pond so that it's not adversely affecting their building.
But my question is, their buildings are higher than my house. You know,
Right.
that whole property, the church is higher than my property. But if you start retaining water in there and build some sort of a water retention, say, take half a parcel 2 and turn it into a water retention holding area or dig it deeper, how are you gonna restrict the water that's coming out of Heritage Meadows?
No, I'm saying
Behind the neighbors and
if that's coming out today, then that's part of the existing water flow that we've talked about. Now, again, will I collect that and reduce the rate at which it goes downstream by 20%? That's the goal here. And so they take that calculation into account. They look at, I don't remember if it's a 50-year storm. I don't think that's what they're typically built to be able to handle.
So is there a possibility of water retention besides being in parcel 2? Is there a possibility that there's going to be water or configuring the area behind my house and behind the neighbor's house?
Behind your house, I don't know if that's their property.
No, it's not. It's
Yeah.
my property and the folks.
Who owns it? Who owns that property?
If I may interject, I think it's owned by the development, and there's a town drainage easement in that area.
That whole open area is owned, me, the neighbor, the folks on the.
But I think there's,
You look at the plots, these condos, buildings here, they own all the way out.
I understand that. What I'm saying is that the town of Henrietta has a drainage easement over all that whole area.
So if we have a drainage easement, we can take a look at whether it makes sense to help with this. And again, we'll take a look at that. There's only so much burden we can put on the developer, to be fair to them. However, one of the things we can take a look at is have them provide an inlet for us, a pipe inlet, and then we could take a look at, does it make sense for our crews to put that in? Again, that's gonna come out of the design process. I can't answer that question here, but as I mentioned earlier, we are going to take a look at, can we reduce the amount of water that ends up in your yard? And
I don't have any water in my yard.
and your neighbor's yard.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Just worried about my basement and raising a.
well, that's what I mean. It's not necessarily on the surface.
Right.
But if it's in your basement, it's in your yard, right? It's just underground by that point.
Yeah, that's the only thing I had.
Yeah.
Wanted to bring up on the record.
Yeah, now, like I said, if it's already underground by the time it comes through here, none of that's gonna help. If it's coming down the surface and it's soaking in through that area, then yes, some kind of swale and collection will help, but so as I mentioned, we can't perform miracles. It's a big flat area. It's high clay content. There's all the problems we got, but where we can, we will do something if we
But
can.
would you also be try to restrict stuff back up into Heritage Meadows?
But I don't know what you mean by that. How do I restrict that?
Well, there's a underground pipe that comes out from Heritage Meadows that feeds, that's where the bulk of the water comes from.
So
I was gonna say, we're,
is there an outlet there, you're saying?
An outlet from from Church, is it Churchview? There's.
So how is there just an outlet that's dumping out into
No,
the,
it dumps into it from Heritage Meadows, from Old Settlers.
so what are you asking?
There's an underground water pipe that comes out from where the cement ditch is, where this property here. That's where the water starts to come from.
Okay, so he's indicating on the map on the right-hand side of that concrete channel, and you're saying it's basically comes from an underground pipe into the concrete channel. So the question, so if the question is, could we take a look at continuing the underground pipe instead of the concrete channel? And if that's going to reduce the amount of water that then gets into the ground table, we can certainly take a look at that. And again, as to whether that is put as a burden on the developer or whether that's the town, and we just ask the developer to give us a place to connect that pipe to, that's the more likely scenario. If it were his property, we could put that requirement on him. It's not fair to a developer. What he's willing to help, we'll always take it. But like I said, what we can ask him to do is give us a place to connect that pipe to, and then our crews could connect that pipe. If it makes more sense to do it as a pipe than a channel.
It's just with the changes going on with parcel 2 or parcel 1, parcel 2 being sold to the developer. And that's all that water doesn't come from the church.
No, I understand that.
It's coming from other places. So is it going to be restricted going back from those other places?
No, I can't. Well, again, so let's say close that pipe down. Now I've got those areas flooding. So no, we cannot hold back the water from those areas. And they're not doing the development. But to the point being, if we can bring that over to this retention pond and it builds up and it holds back and it slows down the rate at which it goes downstream, great. If the problem that you're having today is because it comes out in this concrete channel, overflows the concrete channel, soaks into the ground and ends up at your basement walls, well, then maybe we take a look at, again, I'm not a stormwater engineer. Someone's going to take a look at that, but we can certainly investigate that. So I can't give you the answer as to what's going to happen because I'm not the engineer and they've got to take a look at this, but we will certainly take a look at it. And if it makes sense to pipe that outflow underground over to the pond, and then we'll do that if it makes sense.
I'm not sure how that's going to work with gravity.
That's what we'll have to find out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. There was a gentleman back here. Yep, come on up.
Donald Heineman, 485 Hollybrook Road. And I must have missed the first mailing, and I'm just here because of the second mailing. And my concern also is with the drainage. Allen's Creek runs right through my backyard, and it cuts my yard back in half. I have a bridge to get over with it, and also my neighbor. And that water, if that's downstream, I would, if you're talking about putting the water downstream, I'm downstream. Okay, I've been there 36 years, and I've been through numerous floods that were so-called 500-year storms. Okay, you cannot put any more water through that system.
So it's, again, the whole point of the retention pond is it reduces the amount of water going downstream by 20%.
Well, that's good because that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I wanted to find out what's going to happen with
now, like I said, just to be clear, the total volume of water doesn't change. When it rains, that water is going to end up in Allen's Creek one way or the other, right? The issue is the rate at which it flows into that.
Well, they're going to have to slow it down.
Right. What's that?
They're going to have to slow it down because right now, 2 days ago, it was this far from the top.
Yeah. Well, one of the other problems you have is downstream from you, there are a number of very active beavers. And they dam up the creek and that's,
Downstream from me goes down Shady Creek
oh, I
under
know.
Castle Road.
Yeah, I know. And then and then it eventually crosses the golf course and out.
Well, that culvert under Castle Road, that did not help the situation at all. I've been there, like I said, 36 years. When we get heavy rains, that thing's right up to the top. My backyard is a
The culvert
floodplain.
actually-
It had kayakers kayaking in my backyard.
The culvert at Castle Road is actually larger than it was.
And it didn't help the creek flow at all.
Oh, it didn't hurt it either, though. I'm telling you, the downstream, this is what I'm saying, it can only go so fast because downstream from there, it levels out. It has to make its way actually under the canal. But in between there is an area full with some very active beavers.
Right, well, right, I'm not
and we
concerned about
always have to,
downstream. I'm concerned about more water going in it and coming through.
so as I stated,
All that water
the
comes
rate
to me.
the rate at which they are going to have to, so they will improve the situation for you because they will be reducing the amount of water that goes into Allen's Creek from a rate standpoint. They're not creating any new
From
water
what it is now.
from what it is now.
Yeah, that's
Right.
what my concern was.
But I will also be clear, there's a lot more than just this development that goes into the creek. So they're gonna
Yeah, I've
reduce from
seen it over
20%.
years. It's they built and built.
Right, they're gonna reduce. But again, the amount of water that ends up in that creek, it's the same amount of water. The issue is the rate at which it gets into there. And so that's what we can control, the rate at which it gets in there. Unfortunately, in years past, they didn't pay as much attention to stormwater management. And so you absolutely saw an increase at the rate at which water gets into the creek. With all new developments, they're required to reduce the rate at which they get into the creeks. And so, you can see some development for us. It's Red Creek right here. And especially where you get the multiple branches of Red Creek joining right behind the Red Creek development, that floods constantly. There's a lot of flood plains here in town. As we said, they are going to have to reduce the rate at which it flows into Red Creek. It will help. Will it solve the problem? No, because there's so many other sources that are existing going in there. As other stuff changes, so in that region, they'll reduce others. But again, there's not a good way to reduce some of the existing ones that don't have these stormwater management facilities. The thing is going downstream, again, it can only go downstream at a particular rate. The new culvert is actually bigger than the old culvert, but again, that wasn't the bottleneck. That's not where the bottleneck is for the creek. That's a bit in other locations, the creek is narrower or wider than at the culvert. So that is not the bottleneck.
Yeah, well, I'm just addressing my concern about it. They can't put any more water going into that creek.
They are not. They have to
Everybody gets flooded. I don't even get it at work. Other people get it worse than I do.
And that is the case. I will state it again.
500-year storms in 36 years.
I'll state it again. They are not allowed to put water in at a faster rate than existing. They must reduce the rate at which it goes into the creek by 20%. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
What I'm here for.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anyone else coming up?
Hello. I reside at 93 Exeter in the Lysander and Exeter area. My concern, the concept plan, I have no problem. It looks like 18 units and it's, a well-planned document. The only 2 points I have are turn radiuses and view distances. Currently with the fire station and the Pinnacle access onto just north of here, Lysander is the only access for the 60 homes that I reside in. And there's issues that come up. I love our street trees, but we've got some big mature pines that are out almost where your view shed looking north toward Castle is impacted. And I can see part of the overlap coming off of Pinnacle. But when there's emergency situations and they're coming out of the fire hall, that right lane is almost invisible. There's just enough curve on the highway there. So my concern, obviously, that development was put in the 60s and the access road is narrow on the end on Lysander. Here, it looks like we're coming off a 49.5-foot wide highway. And I believe they're talking 30 feet. And there's a children's center in there as you're coming in by the church on this egress road. I'm just wondering if that end from Pinnacle to where the 90-degree access to this development is going in, if 30 feet is really significant enough. If we think about construction equipment, we think about emergency equipment in the future, making those turns. There's a play yard fence, I believe. I'm not sure if it's classified as a daycare or a children's center or just what, but there's a low height fence there on the church side. And I'm just wondering, coming from Pinnacle, if that ends to this egress.
Sure. So I will state when they get to the planning board step, they absolutely look at that. Our fire marshal actually has the turning radius for all of the radii for all of the large emergency vehicles, including the Quint, which is the one that has the largest turning radius. So they will make sure that it can safely navigate that corner. But thank you for bringing that concern, especially, you're right, as I look at it, if they're coming northbound on Pinnacle and make the right, or southbound on Pinnacle and making the left, there is that fence there. It might take a look at is, if there's a concern about a vehicle coming around and, would it maybe make sense to put a bollard near there just to make sure a vehicle doesn't end up in the playground? Might be something worth taking a look at.
Yeah, if I could speak to that briefly. So that these are two Monroe County roads, both roads. So this plan, even though we're not changing the access, has got to go to county for review, and they're going to take a hard look at that. And we understand too that we want to make sure we don't have any conflict points with the church, and we're going to work with them. We talked briefly about some ideas, incorporating maybe an island, do some separation to help with those things. So we're going to take a hard look at that when the plans have more detail.
Okay, thank you.
The good news is because of the nature of the development, don't get me wrong, there will be construction vehicles, but it's typically less than if I'm creating a bunch of individual homes, because the difference here is they come in, we'll do all the excavation at once, get all the basements in. Then typically when they're doing the framing, they'll just come in once and they'll just move right across building to building. So basically you'll see the first building, while it's, foundations go in as much as they can do in a day, then they'll start building the framing on top of that and they just move along. So I don't have as much in and out as I do where it's a neighborhood where, okay, this house is started, they don't start building until the house is sold, right? So they're staggered more, and therefore you have a lot more in and out. Because of the way this is being designed and built, that should be a lot less. So.
Yeah, and at peak commuter times, I don't know if there's anything possible with the fire hall to have a cautioning light across. So if they're coming out with a large truck and trying to make a left to go down Pinnacle South.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I'll bring that up to our highway superintendent. Again, it would have to be coordinated with the Monroe County DOT. But we can take a look at, is there a way with hopefully with radio, so we don't have to run a conduit, that if they essentially when they launch the vehicles, for lack of a better way to put it, that those lights flash, caution. That's an interesting idea. I'll bring that up at our next meeting with the highway superintendent.
And I
Okay.
think,
That's irrespective of what's happening here. That's just in general a good idea.
side of the road from Stone.
Can you stay in front of the microphone? So the minutes, stay in front of the,
So
no,
we can hear you.
there you go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm sorry. The east side of the road has got pretty good view shed because it's open
Yeah.
from Stone up. But adding in Lysander into the equation in the offset on Lysander in the fire station, that's the area. It's not directly this project,
Yeah.
but it's a neighborhood related issue. So thank you so much.
I'm in that neighborhood, so I'm very familiar. I'm not just down the road from there. So, but I don't think you stated your name for the record.
Doug Ververs.
Okay, Doug?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any others? Coming up?
Mike Andrews, 59 Bell Tower. And my question is more of a process question. And so if the zoning's approved today, then it sounds like it moves to the planning phase.
To the planning board, yeah.
Okay, and so similar to the previous project on Erie Station, will there be a chance for input on things like setback in the sightline, those kinds of things prior to actually going to the?
So, yeah, so we'll make, prior to it going to the planning board, no, typically at planning board, so it'll be at planning board. They'll do a presentation of the plans. The planning board will ask a bunch of questions. In terms of, can there be a mailing going out like the last one? Yes, we can do a mailing.
Okay.
So that you have a chance to provide feedback to the planning board
Right.
as far as those issues. It's typically, again, so let's say this gets approved for the rezone, and again, looking at it, when you look at the need for housing, and I get it, it's a nice open field today. But no one's gonna buy an empty field.
Right, and I just want
to finish the point, so, when you look at the need for housing, it makes a lot of sense. So like I said, I can't speak for the rest of the board. I'd be shocked if this didn't pass. But then at that point, then they've got a whole bunch of design work to do. And then they essentially submit those plans to the planning board. Once they're ready, they submit them to the planning board. That's when the notice will go out. They'll be online. You'll be able to pull them down, look at it, offer comments. You can either email them to the planning board, or again, there will be a notice that goes out for when they are going to be in front of the planning board, and you'll be able to provide input at that point.
Okay, because just to be clear, I'm not challenging the project overall.
Right.
I was really just trying to understand. I got the sense, just kind of listening through the Erie Station project, that there's been a fair amount of conversation back and forth between the existing homeowners and the developer. And I was just hoping that we'd have kind of a similar kind of relationship.
So this one's a bit less because this is the first project, and this one is a better fit for the area. The old one's a little strange because years ago, when Delphi came in, they took what's essentially a residential neighborhood and they plopped an industrial zone right in the middle of it. And so the developer came in, bought the industrial property, and he wanted to put in and everybody was like, well, this is going to change the character of the neighborhood, and it's an industrial zone. So then we talked to him about, so there's been more go-rounds. This has been one. Now they did have, like we asked with all these things, we had them hold a neighborhood meeting. They came in, had that neighborhood meeting, shared their ideas, took some of that feedback. And then, in terms of the setbacks on here, I will say though, if you look at the two projects, one was what? The earlier one was 40 acres and this one's 5. So in terms of an ability to shift the stuff around, there's not a whole lot of room. Right now, they are doing everything within code to my knowledge, I don't think, is there anything, Chris, that requires yeah, come on up. Yeah. To my knowledge, there's nothing right now. They're not looking at any variances, are they?
No, so basically, again, Chris Martin, Director of Engineering and Planning. This is a little unique, because it is gonna be a subdivision. So unlike the last one that we saw for the rezoning, that was a multifamily. So in this case, if the rezoning gets approved, the next step will be a preliminary subdivision of a submittal to the planning board, which involves a public hearing. So you'll get a mailing very similar to what everybody got today, to go over the public hearing for the plan for the subdivision. Because this is what we call a cluster development, the town board has to approve the open space. So it'll have to come back to the planning or town board rather to, review that. And at the planning board, we'll discuss setbacks and things like that. But they are going to be less than what's typically required for an R215 zoning. If it makes that hurdle through the town board for the open space / approval of a conservation or the cluster development, then it'll come back to the planning board for final subdivision approval. Again, that's not a public hearing at that point, but we'll invite the public like we have for these last couple, for this meeting and the subsequent meetings. So it does have a long process to go through. And as the applicant will get further into the planning board, we'll have more detailed plans that'll show what the setbacks are, the rough size of the units, things of that nature, and the lot layout.
And Chris, what's the timing?
Well, it depends on my good friend here, John Sharaba, but typically for this process, I would guess, because town board can't make a decision tonight on the zoning because we're still doing seeker. So everything goes well, they'll approve the rezoning at the first meeting in July. Then it'll depend on how fast Land Tech can turn around into the preliminary side of it. And I'm gonna guess, John, that'll take a couple months. That'll bring us into probably late August, early September. From when they submit, it's a month process because we have things that we have to do. We have to review the plans and things of that nature. So once that's done and the planning board approves the preliminary subdivision, goes back to the town board, now it's another month. And then when they approve it, it goes back to the planning board. So if I were to guess, you would maybe late fall, first part of winter before everything could get approved.
I will say that in terms of the open space, there might even be a way to shorten that down some because we're not planning on taking any open space.
Right, but did the cluster development?
I understand that. It still has to get the approval. I understand that. I'm just saying, my point is normally we wait through the whole thing because we have to take a look at, does it make sense for usually what happens with stuff like, it usually is more for a subdivision in the more traditional sense where I'm building a bunch of homes. They want to build the homes closer together. It reduces the cost. And then you end up with what I refer to as the land squeezed out. That land has to have some form of conservation easement. If there's not a homeowners association, typically what they want to do is they want to donate that to the town. So because if it's not, someone has to pay taxes on it. That's where a lot of our parks come from, right? Now, one of the things that I've been object to is in these new developments where they create these narrow green belts. Some green belts in town make sense where they're like connector paths, so from neighborhoods they can get to the schools. Other areas, they make no sense. It's just small strips that we have to mow and maintain, and it's a pain. And so what we've done for those ones is we've just put a conservation easement over the property, and the people can't put sheds or they can't put structures there. For ones like this where I have an HOA, any of the open space, they're just gonna own.
Right.
So this one, my point is this open space approval will be really quick and easy because we're not taking any land. Normally, as Chris was mentioning, for the cluster development, it can be a more prolonged process. So I'll give you an example. when we did the one for off of Ward Hill, Forest View, there was a portion of it that was going to become a town park, actually a county park. There's a portion of it that becomes a town preservation area, which is where all the storm pond and other stuff is. There's a portion of it that was going to be preserved, conservation easement over the yards. And there was a portion that was, they were putting a conservation easement on the neighboring farm. They were paying that farmer to put in. That was the most complex one we've ever done. There were like 4 or 5 different types. This one's a piece of cake. All land squeezed out. It's going to have a conservation easement. They will not be able to build on it. And again, the whole idea of clustering is I start with my conventional plan and it says I can fit 18 units. I now push them closer together. I can't then come back 2 years later and say, well, I want to build a house on this open space. That's the whole point of the conservation easement, is to prevent that from happening. So in this case, because there's going to be an HOA, it's real simple. We put the conservation easement, they can't build it. The land's owned by the HOA pays it. But that also goes back to why he can't really guesstimate what those fees are going to be, because that's some of what the HOA fees are going to cover is the taxable, you know, they're going to have to cover the property taxes on the HOA land. So. Does that answer all your questions?
Well, I just want to say, make one statement before he leaves, but go ahead. Before you leave,
Well,
Chris,
all I was gonna say is, John, it sounds like you offered a chance maybe to, if I had any specific questions, I could reach out. So, okay, perfect. Okay.
I just want, well, Chris was here. I just want to point out again that Chris and I spoke briefly about drainage. That's really the biggest part of this project. And I'm committed to Chris about coming up with a plan holistically prior to getting into really heavy design, want to come up with some goals, expectations, and our working relationship will, I'm sure that'll be a very good outcome. So I just want to make sure.
No, we appreciate that. And we know, again, you happen to have another developer who does work with the town and try to come up with solutions that work with the town, developer Lou Bavone. We've worked with him on other projects and John's been his engineer on those projects as well. And, you know, we'll basically say, here's what's got to be done to try to come up with the best solution. And as I said, you know, if there's areas behind the other houses that's on land that they don't own, but we have a drainage easement, and it makes sense for us to tie stuff in there and to try to pull that water away, then we'll take a look at doing that. But again, it's not fair to put that burden on the developer because that's not their sins, for lack of a better way to put it. If it's their property, then it's their sin. If it's someone else's property. However, if we have a drainage easement and at the same time, you know, for us to do that improvement now, there's no place to take that pipe, but hey, if during this design, we can have a place for that to go and to deal with it, that type of stuff, we can take a look at that. It may or may not make sense. I don't know. Again, I'm not an engineer. I don't even play one on TV. But you know, these guys will take a look at that. And I will say one of the other things I talk about is my deputy town supervisor stays on top of the SWIP stuff, stormwater pollution prevention plan. As does Chris's whole department. So we do pay a lot of attention to it because, as we've talked about, it's a flat town in a floodplain of a river, clay soil, lots of problems. So it's something that, and obviously if I've got a whole bunch of water against my foundation, that can create problems. So we try to minimize that as much as we possibly can. Unfortunately, a lot of the older homes, and oh, by the way, you know, Lysander, Hollybrook, those are some of the oldest neighborhoods in town. They were built before people really paid a whole lot of attention to that stuff. So there are some sins there that kind of baked in, but whatever we can do to reduce the water going into those systems, that again, the rate at which those water go into the systems, it will help both downstream and upstream. Because again, if I put a whole bunch of water in downstream, that slows the rate at which the water getting there comes in, especially into a pipe, but even into a stream. Because if you think about it, if the delta between the upstream location and the downstream location, the greater the change in elevation, the faster the flow rate. If I'm putting a bunch of water that raises that water level, that slows the flow rate down. and reduces the rate at which it's coming downstream. So there's a lot of hydrodynamics that are involved in this stuff, far beyond my ability to calculate, but I at least understand the basic principles. At least I think I do, if Chris hasn't corrected me, so I'm going to pretend I do. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? So as we mentioned with the other two, this is the first meeting. We will not be ruling on this tonight, so I will be closing this session, but we will be holding the public hearing open for 3 weeks till the next meeting, which is 3 weeks from today. Did we have any homework for John? I don't know that there was any additional homework. We gave homework to.
I don't need
ask
any more.
for,
Good.
yeah.
Are they gonna have that staked out before the next meeting or not?
I mean, I didn't plan on it.
Okay, just a question.
Yep.
I wasn't.
But it was going to be done before the goes to the planning board before the subdivision, since that's essentially what's going to be drawing that property line will change, but these are the ones that have the 0 lot lines around the house. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So basically what you'll see is around each unit, there'll be a tight boundary, and that's the property that they own. And then the grasslands and the roads and the park driveways, parking areas, that's all owned in common by the homeowners association. So this is for people who don't want to have to mow their lawns anymore. That's why you see those. So it won't affect that back property line, but at that point, they're going to have to bring in a surveyor anyway to survey the subdivision. So that's the time it makes the most sense to stake that out. You want it staked out. In fact, legally, it has to be staked out by a licensed land surveyor. Any property line decisions have to be done by a licensed land surveyor. So, any other questions, comments? And hearing none, I'm going to close this session of the public hearing for the proposed local law to rezone approximately 5 acres of land adjacent to Pinnacle Lutheran. The next session will be 3 weeks from today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our last public hearing, let me check on the next page, make sure. Yep. Our last public hearing is a proposed local law to amend the zoning code of the town of Henrietta to clarify uses allowed with a special use permit and prohibited uses in planned commercial districts. So this is one I will thank Jerry Goldman, an attorney, who basically found in our planned community, in our planned commercial district. So this is the areas between Highland, in and around Marketplace, Highland, that area. You're actually allowed to have car dealerships there. But if you go to the allowed uses, the permitted uses, you won't find it anywhere on the list. And as it turns out, the only place it is included is in the prohibited list, where it says all the uses that are prohibited in a commercial B1 zone are prohibited here, except the following. And so what we're doing is the ones that make sense, we're moving over. Well, right now, the way the law is written is it's moving all of those that are contained in that section into the area that details those uses which are permitted with a special use permit. And then we're modifying the prohibited section to basically say all uses prohibited in the commercial district are prohibited here unless expressly permitted. That is the better way to do it. So I am not including new permitted uses in the prohibited use section. And sorry for, I don't know how finger twisting that this is for our interpreters. If it is, I apologize. So anyway, the big question that I want to have the discussion tonight with the town board is the question of the use of, or the allowed use of dealerships. I think we can all pretty much agree we don't want car dealerships on Highland Drive in that area. But the question right now is, the way I've written it is it allows them to be on the west side of Marketplace Drive. And the PCD starts on Marketplace Drive on the west side, the northernmost edge of the PCD is the northern edge of the former Regal movie theater. And so the way we've written it is it can start there and then continue to, I don't remember what distance I chose, but some distance of Highland Drive. So it stops it before it comes around the bend. Whereas we normally wouldn't want, you know, there's been a big push on the expansion of car dealerships. We also look at, I think that we have the potential that the old movie theater could be empty for quite some time because it's going to be a hard parcel to develop. One of the uses that could potentially go in there is a car dealership. The thing I look at, whereas I wouldn't want to see car dealerships, for instance, all up and down Jefferson Road or on Highland Drive, I don't personally have a big issue if the old movie theater became a car dealership. But I do know that there is, you know, there are feelings that we already have too many in town. So, cognizant of that, that's why we basically, I wanted to bring that up and just have some discussion. So I will open it up to the rest of the board to see what other people think. And certainly if anybody's listening to this, sees it, reads the minutes later, wants to provide input, by all means, send an email to supervisor@henrietta.org and I'll get it out to the rest of the town board. We're happy to get people's input, but I now open it to the rest of the board. Who wants to go?
Well, I'm not saying that I'm against a car dealer at that site, but you know, we had Auto Row, which was always referred to West Henrietta Road, and that's kind of where I'm wavering a little bit, and that's what I thought. The other question I do have is if Jerry's already involved, does he have a potential client for that piece, or?
To my knowledge, he doesn't. I don't know that he has a potential piece. I ran into him somewhere and he was just talking about, I'm like, I don't know who we're going to get to come in there. And he made the offhand comment, well, maybe you could get a car dealer. I said, you can't get a car dealer. It's not on the allowed use. And he said, it's in there. And then we went right on my phone and we couldn't find it. And then 2 weeks later, he called me up and he said, I found it. I knew it was in there somewhere.
Okay. I just
No, it
wondered
wasn't
where
a
this
specific-
all came from originally.
Yeah, no,
And-
that's how it, that's absolutely how it started. So
Okay.
with that said, you know, he has represented, I think it's Scotty.
Yep.
That owns that. He has represented him in the past, but, I've not heard any proposals. Well, let me rephrase that. There was a, company that was looking at there and they were looking at, Southtown. There were two companies looking at both. One of them did decide to go to Southtown, the furniture store.
Okay.
They thought Southtown was a better location. And that's one of the things, when you look at that location, it is not the best for walk-in, right? That's Jefferson Road is great for walk-in because I've got a lot of visibility. For a movie theater, right, it doesn't typically get walk-in, right? You don't walk down and say, oh, I should go to a movie right now, and you know, because they're at a specific time. So it was a great location for a movie theater because it was kind of, I won't say off the beaten path, but at least adjacent to it. But for some businesses, it's not all that attractive, which I think is going to be part of why they're going to have a little bit more difficult time developing it. There was one other potential use. However, as I mentioned, they haven't gone to Southtown yet, but they ruled this one out. It was U-Haul. They basically, as I understand it, said no to this location. And again, I think that one's a little bit different. I think they get a lot of business from RIT and they didn't want to move away from RIT.
So where I am, it was a tough decision, but number one, that building is going to stay there. That building is so unique within itself. You almost have to tear it down And so that changed my thinking a little bit. And then I remembered we approved motorhomes and trailers for the old Gander Mountain parking lot, which is just, the same situation. That's really, is that part of Highland Drive? I guess maybe not Highland Drive, but
That's a good question I don't think that's in the PCD though.
yeah.
We had done that under the specialty, and that was more of a temporary solution. We kind of knew going in that was someone using leverage. He didn't want to move from his current location, but he wanted to get the approval so that he could go back to his current location and say, well, I'm going to move.
So from a
I will just note before you continue on, I will just note that the good news is someone did finally find a tenant for Gander Mountain. There's some stuff we're working with them to help make that happen, but
that's another
yeah,
thing. So at the end of the day, when I look at the big picture, a car dealership there would be an upgrade as far as I'm concerned. I can't think of anything negative. There's nothing there that it's all like almost industrial commercial. There's no residential impact. So I'd be willing to see what they wanted. I'd be willing to see what their plans were. I wouldn't vote against it.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know right now that they have the plans. It's just that if we're gonna fix this code, because right now somebody could come in for a car dealership, like Wilmerite could come in and say, I want to put one on the mall property. I would not want to see that. So I'd rather get the code changed now while we have no applications in, because if someone puts in an application, you change the code, they still get to use the old code. So
I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that, in a vacuum, I'd love to see car dealerships restricted only to Dealership Row. I know it's been said already, the unique nature of the Regal property is, unique. I think that there was a tenant that was interested, we would have seen them by now. And I think also given its location, I don't consider it to be terribly out of character with what's around it. Again, I'd love for another tenant to come in there, but I think that in this instance, I could see a car dealership.
Hold on one second. You got it? Yeah.
One quick question. Are we voting on, we're not voting.
We're not voting on any of this. I just wanted input now just to find, because my point, if people were against it, I was gonna change the proposed local law for next meeting. But it sounds like we'll leave it with the we're just closing the door for off scene because there's a lot of discussion going on in the hallway. Thank you. Yeah, so I just wanted to have that discussion this week so that we can amend the local law, because the local law in its finished form has to be on our desks. I think it's 1 week or 10 days, 7 days prior to us actually voting on it. So that's why I wanted to, since we've got, it's a 30-day limit anyways. We even if we wanted to, we couldn't pass it today, but I just wanted to have this discussion, see which form we want the local law. And it sounds like, I think we're all the same opinion. If it were a more attractive parcel that wasn't likely to sit empty, we'd probably say, let's just get it out of there entirely. But given a choice between seeing a derelict former movie theater that's slowly rotting and a car dealership, we'd rather see a car dealership. But I don't know what that says about car dealerships, but I will apologize to all the car dealerships that's we see you as just a step above an empty, decrepit building. But so
Okay.
All right.
Mike.
Oh, what that?
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're already, I have to close this. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. No, I got you. So with that said, then I am going to close this section of the public hearing for the proposed local law to amend zoning code to clarify uses within the planned commercial districts. again, we will hold the public hearing open for the meeting 3 weeks from today. All right, now we can resume the resolution.
Mr. Supervisor, and fellow board members, I have resolution 10-226, 2025 to ratify and or, I'm sorry, to approve and or ratify the following agreements.
Seconded.
Sorry.
Any questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 10-227, 2025 to authorize bills payable and any associated contracts or agreements for May 23rd, 2025 through today, June 11th, 2025.
Second.
So one of the larger payments on there was for the debt service on the bond for the library.
Gosh.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 10-228, 2025 to approve porch repairs, renovations, and parcel fill and grading for a historic property at 196 Castle Road under Article 10 of the Town Code.
Second. So this is for 196 Castle Road. We had issued a stop work order because they were doing stuff without the proper approvals. They've since come in, they have paid to have this stop work order lifted. We make very clear that if they, which two projects they're have approval, because there's other stuff that they want to do as well. They haven't submitted plans yet for those that have received approval from the Article 10 approval from, it's on the recommendation of the Historic Site Committee, but and this is the actual approval itself. But anyway, it makes it clear that if they do any work other than what's approved above, will result in a new stop work order. And if they deviate from the approved plans, that we would issue a new stop work order. You know, I think we finally got the message home that you knowingly bought historic property, you have to follow the rules. So, any other questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Fellow board members, I have resolution 10-229, 2025 to authorize the supervisor to sign a sidewalk easement agreement with Southside Church of Christ on Calkins Road.
Second.
So this will allow us to complete the last section of sidewalk that will complete the connection from on Calkins Road, going from Pinnacle all the way over to Tinker Park. Thank you to the Southside Church of Christ on coming up with the agreement, and thank you to attorney for the town, Dan Mastrella, on his work on this one. There was some change in, I don't know if it was leadership or attorneys at Church of Christ, so this kind of took longer than expected, but glad we've got it across the finish line. Any other questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution 10-230, 2025 to authorize the supervisor to sign an updated intermunicipal agreement with Monroe County for a multimodal path along East River Road.
Seconded.
So we had an IMA in place when we were doing some of the grant payments, submitting some of the grant payments. They notified us Basically, I think before, as we were going to do those, the attorneys for the county noticed that the way we have, the rules of the grant didn't match what was in the IMA, so they've adjusted the IMA to fix that. So this just basically, it just has to have to do with the reimbursement. For those, some of the grants, you have to have canceled checks. So they can't just issue us an invoice and then we pay it and we get reimbursed. They actually have to have done the work. So it just changed the schedule as to when it gets reimbursed. Any other questions, comments? I will note that they're actually starting to get to where they're doing, obviously the design work's been done for a while, but they're actually starting to put in some of the stuff. If you look over some of the connector sidewalks on the west side between the lodge and the hill, starting to go in. There was already all the stuff built by the developers that we had put on as part of the community space for the apartment complex, the mixed use is over there. So some of those connections are going in. We're to the point where you'll start to see these things going in.
Long time coming.
Yep. Yeah. Of course, the longest delay being DASNY, but okay. Any other questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, resolution number 10-231, 2025, to authorize the supervisor to sign an agreement between the town of Henrietta and the Rush Henrietta Central School District for mutual benefit for fuel, salt, and facility use.
Second.
So I already had discussions with Andy Whitmore and I just lost your name, Superintendent
Mullen.
Superintendent Mullen from the school district. They are in agreement with this. Basically, the original agreement was way back in 1984. As you can imagine, the price of salt is a little bit different. In addition, we were trading it for janitorial services. We don't use those anymore. What we did add under here, we've been getting our fuel from their facilities. We pay their costs plus an administrative fee. So we're doing the same thing with the salt. They've been getting their road salt from us. We've just not been charging them for it. But with the price of salt, the increase in the price of salt, we just can't afford to keep doing that. So they thought, yeah, no, that makes sense. The last thing we rolled in, though, is we still do share facilities and events. Now, what we don't do is, in other words, if it's our facility, our janitorial service cleans it. If it's their facility, their janitorial service cleans it. So basically what we're saying is, unless we expressly talk about it ahead of time, it's a wash. If we use their facility, they don't charge us. If they use our facility, we don't charge them. If there is going to be additional costs incurred here, so let's say that it's going to require overtime, then we have that discussion up front. We agree to those costs and we make that exchange. But it just, again, it's a much needed upgrade from 1984. Any other questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Before we go on, I'll just note that love the great relationship we've had with the school. We have had with the school district, and we'll hopefully continue moving forward. I will miss when Andy Whitmore retires. Was it next week? He's been great to work with, and sad to see him go. Tried to talk him into staying until the end of my term, but he would have no part in it. So, yeah, he's a very great guy. Just love working with him. So, go ahead, Rick.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, that resolution number 10-232, 2025, to update the 2025 building and fire prevention fee schedule for special events with alcohol.
Second. So one of the things we have been doing a temporary special use permit. That works for people who are in the commercial zones. It doesn't work for churches. And we had a church this came in because the church wanted to have alcohol at one of their events. So we decided, the reason we have it come to the town board is that's from the liquor authority. The liquor authority wants to see municipal approval, and since we are the approving authority, it needs to come in front of the town board. I checked with them, a town board resolution is sufficient. It doesn't need to be a special use permit. So this way it better handles the, again, these special events. We did keep it like we had been doing, where we allow these folks to do either a single event or an event series. The event series is maximum 6-month period. It can be up to 26 events. Nobody's gone that much. The idea is if they were going to have, for instance, a weekly farmers market, that the 26 comes because that's how many weeks are in a 6-month period. But the other thing I'll say is if it involves alcohol, again, as part of the liquor authority requirement, it has to be the same vendor. It has to be the same people who are in control of operating. So if it's the church, they can't. If they outsource it to someone else to run it, it has to be the same people running the event and the same people serving the alcohol for the whole series. And again, that's a requirement. That doesn't mean they couldn't get 2 permits if they had 2 different vendors. But the point is, one approval, and this is again a requirement of liquor authority. You're specifically approving it for that vendor. So that's when you see some of these restrictions, that's where they come from. And then one of the things we added as we were looking at it, it talked about in some of the stuff that basically said that for some of the larger events, if you have these significant events, now we certainly have them, but if some of these other organizations are to have a larger event that's actually going to require a fire marshal there because of the size of the crowds, we talked about that there's an additional hourly rate. We discovered nowhere in our fee schedule is that hourly rate. So that's why you'll see there's a new entry under professional services, and just to cover that instance. So the idea is, like I said, if they have to come in and they've got massive tent setups and they have to inspect to make sure all the tents are fire worthy and that they have the proper exits and they have the proper crowd controls and all the traffic stuff, that's reimbursed. And the reason, we're not trying to put a heavy burden on these organizations. In fact, we lowered the rate for what's typically the small single events those are typically churches, organizations like the Moose Lodge, the Elks Lodge, folks like that. And so we were trying to reduce the cost for them. But one of the things we've always done with this department is, rather than have it being paid for by the taxpayers, it's actually paid for by the people who need their services. And so we'd had this discussion, and Mike and I've had this discussion, this part of the discussion before. We had a business person who came in and said, well, your inspection fees are 3 times the cost of the inspection fees in this other town. I said, and oh, by the way, they came once every 4 years for this particular thing. I said, well, look at your town taxes. The town taxes there, every year they're paying more. The difference is more than they're paying in our inspection fees, and you only have to pay our inspection fees once every 4 years. And the guy says, good point, never mind. So like I said, part of why we're able to keep our taxes down, besides having a big tax base, is because for things like this, we put the cost of this department on the people who need it, rather than having our property taxpayers cover that cost. So I just thought that's an important point. That's something that started before me, and we've been diligent in keeping that going because I think it's great for the town. So, any other questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Fellow board members, I have resolution 10-233, 2025, to accept a construction observation services proposal from Clearwater Civil LLC.
Second.
So basically, we have one of the folks who's been doing, so we have an inspector who's a full-time employee, and then we have a number of consultants that we use from outside companies. We purposefully have multiple companies so that if there's ever, because a lot of them are engineering firms, if that engineering firm is working on a project, obviously you don't want one of their people to be the inspectors. One of our inspectors is going out on his own. We double checked with the firm he's coming out from. They were okay with us continuing to use him as he goes on his own. It's BME. They are still going to be offered construction services. Basically we split them up amongst the different companies and keep them all busy. With the amount of construction here, keeping the firms busy is not an issue. That's about it. Any other questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Blanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution 10-234, 2025 to authorize the tax surcharge settlement with FSI 90 Goodway LLC for 90 Goodway Drive.
Seconded.
So tax certiorari is it's an action that commercial properties can take. It's essentially similar to the SCAR hearing, but just at a different level of court. When our assessor works to settle these, she works to make sure, tries to not have any refunds, because that's problematic for a lot of the taxing authorities to have to be able to do that. So typically we try to settle with the changes going forward rather than going backwards. She was able to do that for each of these four. The changes were not significant. One of the things I will just comment on to keep in mind for commercial properties is there are 3 different assessment methods available to commercial properties. It's not just ad valorem, which is the value of the property. In addition, there is also one that's based off of the income method, and I don't remember the third one. And Amy, it's not important. If you want to weigh in, great. If you don't, I'm not that concerned. Those are the 2 ones I see the most. In terms of these settlements, I thought they did a good job. It minimizes our legal costs by getting to a settlement early that works well for us and the other taxing authorities as well as the property owners. So I just want to thank her. And this comment more or less covers the next 4 resolutions. Any other questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Blanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 10-235, 2025 to authorize the tax certiorari agreement with FSI 2599 LLC for 2599 East Henrietta Road.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Blanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, resolution number 10-236, 2025 to authorize the tax certiorari settlement with FSI Clay SOP LLC for Clay Road.
Second. Any questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Blanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Fellow board members, I have resolution 10-237, 2025 to authorize the tax certiorari settlement with IBHHQ LLC for 2213 Brighton Henrietta Town Line Road.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Blanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution 10-238, 2025 to appoint Teresa Dukes as the adult member to the Youth Development Advisory Committee.
Seconded.
So we had a member who had to step down, and so they went through a selection process and selected Teresa as the replacement. Any questions, comments?
Just a quick comment. I was at the meeting on Monday night when this came up on their agenda. And the chairman, Dr. Jesse Redwell, brought it up and said that I assume this will be on the agenda in 3 weeks. I said, no, Jesse, you're up on Wednesday. He paid a very, very nice compliment to the efficiency of our courts department for the promptness with which that showed up. So again, another of the countless examples of the great work they do.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 10-239, 2025 to authorize disposition of town records per LGS 1 schedule.
Second.
So this is some of the older records that some records, like a lot of the tax stuff, stays, I think, pretty much forever. This is more, like information about checks that didn't get, that got returned or other stuff like that, that it's beyond their schedule for how long we have to retain them. And so they go and purge those and clean out some of our secure storage. So any questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution number 10-240/2025 to make appropriate budget transfers and adjustments to the 2025 adopted budget.
Second. Any questions, comments? This is mostly to fold in the CHIPS funding.
Mhm.
Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Fellow board members, I have resolution 10-241, 2025, declare intent to be lead agency for a coordinated seeker review for the Canal Side LWRP and PUD project.
Second.
So as folks may know, we've largely completed the creation of our local waterfront revitalization program plan. That is currently at the Department of State being reviewed. And then we've been working on the design for the first project included in there. That's the Canal Side Park and Towpath Village. If we do create that, there would be the creation of a new park. If we decide to move forward with that, I should say. And then one of the ideas is that there would be a creation of a planned unit development around that. So that's a type of zoning district. It's a type of mixed use zoning district. We have one other planned unit development in town. It's Riverton. And so this is largely on land currently owned by the JCC. It would also potentially include 100 Karen Lee Drive. There is a lot of work we have to look into this, from traffic impact studies. There's wetlands on the property. There'd be the potential impact on the canal, housing. There's a whole lot of work that goes into that. It's not a normal seeker process. We're going to do it as a environmental impact study. And so, but the first step in that is declaring intent to be lead agency. And then basically what will happen is, if no one objects, we will declare or we will basically name ourselves lead agents, and then we will issue a positive declaration, which normally we do a negative declaration, which means there are no current identified potential adverse impacts that have been unmitigated. We're saying that there are, and that we're gonna have to look at that through a study. And so that will kick off. If you remember, Mike and Rick were both there when we did this for the update to the comprehensive land use plan in 2018. We went through that process because if we decide to do this, it would be, we would do an update to the comprehensive land use plan. We would incorporate the LWRP plan. We would incorporate the new plan unit development. And then we would also update our zoning code because if you look, there's a section for each plan unit development for the rules specific to that development. And obviously we would also update our zoning map. So this is a significant undertaking. And so that's why we're doing it through a generic environmental impact study rather than just doing it as a simple seeker. Any other questions, comments on that? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution 10-242, 2025 to hire personnel and make changes to the summer 2025 recreation program employees.
Seconded.
Any questions, comments?
Just think we had an extra hire in there on the resolution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hearing and seeing no further comments, please call the roll.
Councilmember Page,
Aye.
Councilmember Belanca,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Do we have any committee reports or miscellaneous reports?
First of all, on Saturday, very successful Kicking Hunger Run, generated more than $6,000 for the food pantry. Coming up next week on Wednesday, June 18th, the Henrietta Community Chorus is holding a free Pops concert at Berger Junior High School at 7 o'clock. And coming up in 3 weeks, Monday, June 30th, is the Pride Celebration here at the Town Hall at 5:30.
Great.
I have nothing to report except I was at the run. I didn't run. Rick looks down at me like, really? No, I watched the entrance, but yeah, great event. A lot of people. I think there was 280 runners, if I remember. So that was a real great event. So.
Okay. I just wanted to give an update. We're in the CFA process, which is Consolidated Funding Application. We're pursuing 5 different grants this year. The first is a pro housing infrastructure grant. So available to communities that are pro housing to put in infrastructure to help spur additional housing. And what we're specifically looking at is to extend Fair Avenue down to connect around to Valiant. We will have to work with the Iacullis who own the parcel to which the road has gone through. We've had some preliminary discussions with them before, and they seemed in favor of it. Why wouldn't they? It will actually reduce their cost to develop the land there. But the idea is a number of the projects that we're going to go in there have fallen through. And some of it is typically it falls through because of costs and the cost of getting the utilities there, the road and the utilities. This money is available to us. And so we're gonna pursue that and see what we can do. As I put it, we are the pro-housingist community in the region. We've had 11% growth, whereas most, and that was just from, the 11% was just from 2018 to 2023. So we've had 2 more years of growth since then. So hopefully that will score well for us. One of the things that we're looking in, so if you go back to the 2011 update to the comprehensive land use plan, it called for a town center. And the idea is to work some of this out. Related to that, I'm going after a New York Bricks grant. This was a recently announced grant opportunity. Again, also only available to pro-housing communities. And this essentially pays for some of the infrastructure. Part of it is to encourage kids to unplug and play, as well as infrastructure to support growing communities. You know, one of the things we've looked at, so we built the new rec center, added 8,000, or I won't say added because we had some space before, but it created 8,000 square foot of space for our gymnastics program. Since 2017, it's almost doubled in the number of participants. We've also taken on the Special Olympics gymnastics program for the region. Great program, but that's also some additional burden there. We've added Ninja, Warrior, and other stuff. We're packed to the gill there. And so the idea would be we would acquire the Dome Arena and we would move the gymnastics into the western half of Minette Hall. So it would be between 12,000 and 14,000 square feet. So a significant expansion of their available space. And that would then free up that space in the rec center for other programs. You know, one of the things that I've considered is we would leave the foam pit where it is, perhaps. This is, again, none of this is in any way final. These are just some initial ideas. We would essentially kind of fence that off as a kids' play area. So when we do our preschool programs and stuff like that, there's an indoor play area in addition to the outdoor. And the other areas, I would look at striping those for pickleball. And that way it gets the pickleball out of the basketball courts. We have less conflict. We could have some essentially permanent indoor pickleball courts, which, as you know from our seniors, highly popular. And then we'd also be using that space as a community center. So there's offices and meeting rooms. If we needed some additional, we could convert some portion of Minette Hall to that as well. I'm also talking with the recreation department to put in some other recreational facilities into Minette Hall. Minette Hall would no longer be available if the way we're looking at it right now would not be available for use in, you know, like it is today for conventions. The dome portion would still be available for that, but not the Minette Hall portion because we'd be using that for our recreational area. The other things that would work really well for is an evacuation site for the high school. If for some reason they ever have to evacuate, it's a good congregation site. Today, the high school itself is a congregation site if there's ever an evacuation notice for Ginna nuclear plant. Well, that creates an issue if school's in session. We could use the dome instead. It would be an evacuation site and warming center so that people could meet there. It would also, we'd have it available as a point of distribution if we ever have another pandemic. If anyone who was there got their vaccines there, or if we ever had like a hepatitis outbreak and had to do quick distribution, it would work real well for that, and it would work real well as a super site for voting. As they switch to the new voting machines, you won't have to have a whole bunch of voting sites. The reason they have to do that today is they're pre-printed ballots for a particular zoning district or voting district. Now what'll happen is you'll go in, they give you a thing that says what voting district you are. It essentially pulls up your specific ballot, so I don't have to have pre-printed ballots. So a lot of use for that. In addition, we don't today have a community center. And a lot of community organizations have come to us and say, hey, we'd like space in your community center. So people like the Nepali Community Organization, I don't know what their real names, but I'm just calling it the Indian Community Organization. There's a bunch of these communities that have made Henrietta their homes and they're looking for space. We don't have a community center, so this would provide that space. And so I'm pursuing the funding for that. As I mentioned earlier, we're pursuing New York Main Street funding. That's to preserve historic properties. We're looking to do that for the West Hamlet, and most notably, there's one that is, it's essentially, I don't remember if it was 50,000 or 100,000 per building. I think it's 50,000 per building, and then you can have I forgot what they called it, a focus building, for lack of a better way to put it, that can be a larger dollar amount. As has been noted, we do have a developer who's coming in, and they've agreed to work to restore the inn. As you can imagine, it's going to be really expensive. And so we're pursuing funding to help reduce those costs. And as I also mentioned earlier, upon hearing that, the owners of Ken's Pizza Corner reached out and said, hey, that building has issues too. Not as much as obviously as the former Cartwrights, but we're very fortunate. Sadly, the Eastern Hamlet, a bunch of fires claimed a bunch of the historic buildings there. Fortunately, in the Western Hamlet, we still have a lot of our historic buildings, and I don't want to see them fall into ruin. The Cartwrights is already there. We're trying to pull it back out of ruin, so we're going to go after that funding. We're also going for a recreational trail program. This is to create the Riverwalk Trail, or specifically a section of it to get through the, we've reached out to the Rinaldis, who own the Riverwood Tech Campus. They've actually put in a bunch of that trail. We would talk to them about whether we do that as an easement or whether we actually take that trail over. But then continuing south through the RG&E property, I've already talked to them about that. They would do that through a trail access agreement with us. We'd have to put up fencing to keep people out of their the Rochester Area Reliability Project, but they'd be good with that. And eventually, again, the goal is to take this trail all the way from Valentine Bridge near basically the RIT campus near Valentine Bridge, all the way south to the Lehigh Valley Black Diamond Trail in Rush. I will note that Rush is part of we went in together on the local waterfront revitalization plan, so it actually covers both towns. And then the last one we're going after is New York Plays, and this one is specifically for playgrounds. And we are looking to convert the existing playground at Veterans Memorial Park. We would remove all the wood chips and we would put in a rubberized surface. It will be more kid-friendly, less chance of splinters, stuff like that, less maintenance. It'll be better for the swings because I won't, as kids swing, they dig out those wood chips, and now little kids can actually make it up into the swings. But it will also allow it to be more accessible. So right now, if there is a parent or family member in a wheelchair, they can't be out there with their kid on the playground because you can't roll a wheelchair through the wood chips. In addition, we would then put in between the two swing sets, we would put in some additional, we'd put in a wheelchair swing, some other accessible pieces of playground. So we're putting that proposal together. And almost all of these, this is one of the things the governor did, you have to be a pro-housing community to do it. And as I mentioned, we are. So don't know how well we'll do if we can get all five, but I would love to.
How many other towns in Monroe County are pro-housing?
I don't know that answer. I know across the state, last count I saw was 250 of the 900 plus towns.
And has anybody even come close to our 11%?
No. Okay. The only one who's come close to us in terms of numbers is the city. But from a percentage standpoint, not even close. I shouldn't say that. There was one other town that I think was at 8%.
Okay.
Which compared to the other numbers, that's pretty good. But no one else is in double digits. So those are what we're looking at. Going to be a lot of work. The CFA is not a user-friendly interface. I don't know yet whether we're going to go out and look to bring in the firm who helped us get the last two. I may. We haven't gotten that far yet. We're just starting to pull together all the documents that we're gonna have to need to upload these, whether we use another firm or not. Probably with going after 5, I will probably bring them in. But some of that will depend on their what they put together for a cost proposal. So, like I said, I don't know whether we'll be able to get all 5, but I'm certainly going to make a play for it. We've had a pretty good track record, and hopefully we can keep it going. Obviously, all that money that brings in, it allows us to add all this additional services to our residents without putting the burden on the taxpayer. So, any other questions, comments? And then, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Hearing no objection, meeting adjourned.
Well, just to consider.